Christmas is coming soon. Nancy gazed lovingly at her newborn daughter, Molly, rejoicing that they would be discharged the day after tomorrow. That meant they would celebrate the holiday surrounded by family. She's so adorable. Daddy's eyes, Mommy's nose, and Grandma's smile. Nancy and Roger had been waiting for this little miracle for 3 years. And finally, God blessed them with such a wonderful girl. Roger was supposed to arrive in about 40 minutes. He came twice a day, bringing everything they needed, always talking to the doctor, and then telling Nancy in detail how he was getting ready to welcome his girls from the maternity hospital. Nancy glanced at the clock. She needed to tidy herself up before Roger arrived. Strange. An hour and a half had passed, and her husband still hadn't shown up. "Roger, where are you? Is everything okay? I'm starting to worry," she said. "Nancy, I'll be a little late. I stopped by the tire service. I got a flat tire. I was just about to call you so you wouldn't worry," he said, cutting the call before waiting for a response. Roger didn't show up until an hour later. Disheveled, he hurried into the room, placing a bag by the bedside table. He glanced at his watch. "Sorry, dear. I'm literally just for a minute. I'm running late for a meeting. I'll stop by tonight. If you need anything, call or text." He approached Molly, quickly looked at her, smiled, waved to Nancy, and left the room. Nancy peeked into the corridor. She felt like taking a shower. As she reached the corner, she heard her husband's voice and abruptly stopped. "Selena, I really hope for your honesty. Nancy shouldn't find out anything. Right now, we don't have any single rooms available. Julia will have to be placed in a double room. We'll discharge your wife the day after tomorrow, and only then can we move Julia and her son to the vacant room. Who knew your son would want to come into the world 7 months early?" Nancy leaned against the wall. Roger had a son. They had waited for their baby girl for 3 years. It turned out someone was waiting, while someone else was just pretending very skillfully. "Well, that's fine. Let her stay in a double room. It's even better," he said. Nancy couldn't bear to listen to her husband anymore. Dragging her feet, she went back to the room. She went straight to her daughter. Molly was peacefully sleeping, swallowing the lump in her throat. She suddenly turned around. With glassy eyes, she stared at Selena and Roger. She looked at her husband, and only one question spun in her mind. Did he really hope to hide his son from her for a lifetime? "Nancy, everything okay?" Roger asked. "Were you in such a hurry to work? Or do you have a holiday today? So you canceled the meeting? What a joy. Your son is born. I get it. I get it. You don't have time for us with Molly. Congratulations. What a wonderful Christmas gift." Selena pretended to be in a hurry. Without saying a word, she left the room. "Nancy, darling, don't worry. Otherwise, the milk will go to waste," Roger said, pinching the bridge of his nose. He took a deep breath. "I should have confessed long ago. I've tried so many times, but I never dared." One chance encounter shattered his peaceful, happy life. If only Julia had spoken up earlier. But that cunning woman deliberately confronted him when all deadlines had passed. All this time, he had to do everything possible to ensure his wife remained unaware and safely reached full term. "Go away. And don't come back. I'll make sure you're not allowed near me. I can't stand the sight of you. Don't you dare embarrass me in front of people or show up at the maternity ward. I won't come home anyway. You can settle your newborn son in our nursery. It's all in pink there." "But whatever." Nancy's voice trembled, but she tried to remain calm. "Nancy, Molly is not only your daughter but mine too. Don't forget that." Roger stepped closer, reaching out to hug her. But Nancy didn't allow it. She stepped back. "I can't bear to see you. Any court will be on my side. You're a hypocrite. A scoundrel. Get out of here." Nancy was ready to scream in despair, but she held herself back. Roger grimaced, pinching the bridge of his nose again. He closed his eyes, took a few deep breaths. To spare you further distress, I'll leave. But know this, you're my wife. Molly is my daughter. As absurd as it may sound, I love you both, and I won't let you go anywhere. Roger paced around his office like a trapped animal. 3 hours had passed since he left the maternity ward. He called his wife 20 times, but Nancy didn't answer any of his calls. He sent several messages, apologized, professed his love again. He even tried to resort to threats, but his wife didn't respond to any of the messages. He was still shaken by memories. What if Julia finds Nancy and tells her everything? How will he prove that he only helped Julia to keep his wife from worrying? The phone rang. It was Julia calling. Roger had no intention of talking to her. He had told her countless times to change doctors. It was a bad idea to be treated by the same doctor who was overseeing Nancy's pregnancy. But convincing Julia was simply impossible. Roger smirked at his own idiocy. Selena's face must have been priceless when she realized who Julia's son's father was. Lord, how did he get himself into all this? Though it was shameful, he finally decided to call the doctor. Selena, hello. This is Nancy's husband. I wanted to ask how she's feeling. She's not picking up, and I'm worried. His face burned with shame. Roger cursed the day he decided to stop and give that girl a ride. Julia waved, and he couldn't just drive by. Nancy had just become pregnant back then. He hadn't thought about the consequences at that time. Hello, Roger. Nancy's doing well. She's holding up. She's trying not to dwell on the bad stuff and not to cry to keep her milk from drying up. By the way, she asked that besides her parents, no one else be allowed into the room. Roger felt like Selena didn't understand him and might even scorn him. That's all. Or do you want to ask about Julia? She asked, making him blush even more. No, I'm not interested in Julia's health. Of course, he was concerned about his son's health. After all, the baby was born prematurely. But right now, he was so angry at Julia that he didn't want to hear anything about her. She had threatened that if he didn't come and pay for her private room, she would give birth and bring Nancy's child. The doctors heard all of it. Roger was ready to sink into the ground out of shame. Even so, Selena asked skeptically, Selena, can I ask you something? If Nancy's condition worsens, please let me know, he requested. Okay, Roger. Selena ended the call, and after a moment of thought, Roger decided that he would still go where he needed to be in the evening, to his wife and daughter. Even if there would be a guard outside their room, he would still go in and talk to Nancy. Approaching the window, Nancy absent-mindedly traced her finger along the glass. Down below, happy fathers stood, sending their wives kisses. Her heart clenched with unbearable pain. Just yesterday, she considered herself successful and happy. But today she didn't know how to go on. Hey, honey. Nancy's mom, Eliza, entered the room. Seeing Nancy's distressed face, she fell silent and slowly approached her granddaughter. Her heart pounded wildly, sensing that something had happened. But she didn't dare to ask. Mom, can you and Dad take me and Dad home from the maternity ward? Nancy fell silent for a moment. She didn't want to disappoint her parents, but she saw no other way. The apartment belonged to Raj's grandmother, and the company where he worked as a deputy director belonged to his father. I won't go home. Raj's son was born today. The whole hospital knows. And I accidentally found out from my doctor. Her mom opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything. She looked at Nancy with shocked eyes. Mom, this isn't a mistake. Roger confirmed it himself. I waited for him, worried. I thought something had happened to him. And he, in the meantime. Nancy bit her lip to hold back tears. I think Molly and I will stay with you for a while. I'll file for divorce, for child support. And while I'm on maternity leave, I'll help you develop your blog about delicious and healthy food. Once I'm feeling a bit better, I'll rent an apartment, and Molly and I will move out. I can't believe this. How could he treat you like that? Her mom exclaimed. Mom, I forbade him from coming to me. I told him not to embarrass me and not to come anymore. Let him take his son, and we'll manage without him somehow. All the doctors and nurses are gossiping. They look at me with pity. Well, it's no wonder. There's a wife and a lover in the maternity ward with newborn babies. Nancy sighed heavily. And your dad and I bought a stroller yesterday and brought it to your home. Eliza sighed heavily. Let him go to hell. Nancy, you are neither the first nor the last whom a husband has stabbed in the back. Nancy took her mom's hands. Mom, maybe you and Dad could go to Rogers and get my things. At least for the time being. Don't worry. Your dad and I will get ready for our granddaughter's arrival. We'll take your things, and we'll buy everything necessary for Molly. It's a shame, of course, that we don't live in the city. But it's okay. Roger didn't want to answer the call. Sure, it was Julia calling again. But when he saw his mother-in-law's number on the screen, he immediately understood that she was already aware, and the conversation would be difficult and lengthy. Hello, Eliza, he said. Roger, when will you be home? We need to get Nancy's things. Eliza got straight to the point. I wanted to go to Nancy's after work. She's not answering my calls, and we need to talk. Roger, I understand that you absolutely must be at the maternity ward tonight. Your son was born. As a loving father, you must inquire about his health. But don't you dare interfere with our daughter in her mess. Don't you dare break into her room. Nancy's had enough of you. Use your brain. You'll talk. But later. Eliza tried to speak calmly and even indifferently. I won't give Nancy's things away. She has her own home. You won't give her things away. Fine. We've heard you. Give them to your girlfriend instead. Nancy will buy new ones. We don't need anything. Take everything. Just leave our daughter alone. You scoundrel. I'll come for the discharge and take the baby home. Molly is my daughter. Don't forget that. Roger yelled. Unlike you, we never forget that. Eliza ended the call. Did you hear? She turned to her husband, waving his hand. Peter started the car. Oh, forget about him. I don't even want to talk about him. Let him give Nancy's things to his mistress for Christmas. And we'll give Nancy money. She'll buy new things. Let's go to the children's store instead. Buy everything necessary for our granddaughter. Roger repeatedly dialed his mother-in-law's number, but she didn't answer. Pushing the phone aside, he walked to the window. Now he had his in-laws against him too. He should have calmly talked, asked for advice. But like a fool, he argued with them over Nancy's things. When he heard the phone ring, he grabbed it. But seeing Julia's number, he bit his lip and smirked. Yeah. What do you want? He asked irritably. What do you mean? What do I want? Are you coming tonight? Julia inquired. No, I'm not coming. And I'm never coming. Stop calling me. I'm working. I can't talk to you all the time. And remember, I'll only acknowledge the child after the DNA test. He abruptly fell silent. There was silence on the other end of the line. Instead of preparing for the upcoming joyful events, he had to sort out everything with everyone and feel like a complete idiot. All because Julia had delusions of grandeur, and now he had to put her in her place. I was told that despite our son being born prematurely, he was born healthy. If everything goes well, they might bring him to me tomorrow. Julia barely uttered. A strange feeling of complete indifference swept over him at her words, as if the information didn't concern him at all. Great. I hope everything goes well for you, he replied. I need your support right now. Our son is in the ICU, Julia said, barely holding back tears. There will be no support from me. I won't show up at the maternity ward anymore. I don't want to embarrass myself. Roger growled into the phone. And you won't go to your wife either. Julia sniffled. It's none of your business. Nancy is my lawful wife. And you are nobody to me. So what if we slept together a couple of times? If you think I'll destroy my family for a fleeting affair, you are sorely mistaken. I'll talk to you only after the paternity test. Roger ended the call. I should have put her in her place right away, he muttered quietly. The door opened, and without knocking, his father, Ron, entered the office. Hey, son, listen. Why can't your mom and I reach Nancy today? I hope everything's okay with our granddaughter. Nothing's changed. We're meeting by the maternity ward the day after tomorrow to bring Nancy and our granddaughter home, Ron said. Roger looked away. It was embarrassing to admit that the event was cancelled. Dad, we're not going to pick up your granddaughter. Nancy and I had a fight. She'll stay with her parents for a while. And don't ask me anything because I don't know anything myself. Don't call her, all right? She won't answer anyway. My wife is very upset with me, Roger said. His father looked at him in a way that made everything inside him turn upside down, as if he expected his son to laugh, pat him on the shoulder, and say it was a joke. But Roger didn't even smile. He got up and headed for the door. Returning from work, Roger packed Nancy's things. He carefully disassembled the crib and changing table, loaded everything into the car, and drove to his in-laws' house. The car stopped near their house. Peter peered out of the window. His heart tightened, then betrayed him by beating faster. Your dear son-in-law has arrived, he grumbled discontentedly. No one hurried to go outside. The gates were closed, and the dog roamed the yard. Eliza leisurely put on her jacket. Roger shuffled around near the car. The light from his headlights illuminated the yard. Why did you come? His mother-in-law's words sounded quiet, but Roger felt like she had shouted them. I brought Nancy's things, he replied. He opened the trunk, took out a suitcase, a bag, and the stroller. When it was the crib's turn, Peter stopped him. Leave the crib for yourself. You'll need it. Take the changing table back too. We went to the store today and bought everything necessary for our granddaughter. Sparks flew from Peter's eyes. It seemed he was about to lunge at Roger with his fists. I wanted to do what's best. It's all for Molly, Roger stammered. Peter grabbed the suitcase, opened the gate, and Roger took the bag. I'll help. Eliza stood in his way, closing the gate. There's nothing for you to do here. Leave, so your presence doesn't pollute this place. We'll carry everything ourselves. Roger stopped, put the bag on the ground. Maybe we could at least come into the yard and talk. I didn't come here to argue with you, he suggested. Our daughter gave birth to her child in a legal marriage. She didn't meddle with a married man. She's not to blame for what her husband turned out to be. Sooner or later, people will find out, Peter said as he snatched the bag from Roger's hands and turned to his wife. Eliza, let's go home. We've taken Nancy's things. We have no other topics for conversation. Let him live with his mistress. Thank God. Our daughter won't have to stew in this hell anymore. Closing the gate in Roger's face, Eliza went inside. While her husband was hauling Nancy's things into the room, she sank onto the couch and cried. What a scoundrel. You can see how he rejoiced that he no longer had to torn between his wife and mistress, that he decided to get rid of all the things himself. Peter sighed heavily, looking out the window. The son-in-law's car was still parked outside. Roger was unloading boxes, bags, and packets from the trunk, arranging them neatly near the gate. It was strange to watch as they suddenly became complete strangers to each other, seemingly unprepared to even talk to one another. That night, Nancy couldn't sleep. It was hard to grasp that she would never return to her husband's apartment and would instead go home to her parents with the baby. Selena empathized with her, promising to discharge her the next day. She wanted to somehow get back at her husband, to ensure that he wouldn't meet her upon her discharge. Unable to sleep, by morning she felt a pain in her neck. Nancy tossed and turned in bed, unable to get up. How are you feeling? Selena asked. I have good news for you. You can call your parents. Let them come in the afternoon. Both you and the baby are healthy, so we're discharging you a day early. Thank you, Selena, Nancy said, lowering her gaze. You're welcome. By the way, If you're curious, your husband didn't visit Julia yesterday or today. I'm not interested. Let them do whatever they want. Nancy waved her hand. Knowing she would leave from here today made her feel so much better. Nancy smiled and sighed with relief. Thank goodness. This nightmare would end. No one would whisper behind her back or look at her with pity anymore. Lately, Roger often reminisced about his life with Nancy. They endured the struggle of infertility for so long, and when they finally saw the test with 2 long-awaited stripes, they couldn't believe their eyes. The joy seemed boundless. He was ready to carry his wife in his arms, fulfilling all her whims. But then he met Julia. That girl was quite audacious. At first, he even liked it. But then, he found himself torn between his wife and the mistress who only dreamed of causing a rift between him and his wife. Roger glanced at the clock. Nancy was supposed to be discharged today. How he wished he could turn back time, correct his mistakes, and never make them again. He would certainly try to earn her trust again, but it would be very difficult. He never intended to tie his life to Julia. One thing was to have a fling. Another was to tie his destiny. If the test confirms that the son is indeed his, he'll help. But she shouldn't expect more than that. Yesterday, he had to tell his parents about his son. He couldn't bear to keep it all to himself anymore. His father just shook his head and chuckled, while his mother couldn't believe that her son could act so despicably. He couldn't understand how he had sunk so low in life. Roger dialed the doctor's number. Selena. This is Roger, Nancy's husband. He hoped Nancy would at least let him hold Molly in his arms. Roger. Nancy was discharged yesterday. I'm sorry. I forgot to call you. We have a single room available now. Shall we transfer Julia? There was silence on the line. Roger. Are you there? No. Selena. We won't be transferring Julia anywhere. Goodbye. Roger hung up. Nancy opened her eyes and turned her head. Molly was cooing in the crib. How good it felt to be home. No one was pestering her with questions. Mom and Dad were ready to take on all the chores, just so she wouldn't get upset or think about her husband. Christmas was coming soon. Dad brought the tree yesterday. Since Nancy left home, her parents hadn't decorated it even once. Nancy sighed heavily. She looked at the Christmas decorations. She remembered how she and Roger always decorated the tree together. She looked at her daughter again. It's a pity Molly would grow up without a father, but there was nothing to be done. She wasn't to blame for Roger deciding to have another child behind her back. During this week, Roger visited several times, sent flowers, but Nancy told her parents not to even let him into the yard of the house. Roger sat in his office, gazing thoughtfully out the window. He tried calling again, but when Nancy heard his voice, she hung up. Her behavior indicated that she had no intention of forgiving him. They used to be happy, sharing in each other's sorrows and joys, supporting one another. But in an instant, they lost it all, leaving behind nothing but ruins. Roger glanced at his phone. The screen had long gone dark, but he still couldn't figure out what to do. Julia is being discharged today. She tearfully begged him not to abandon her at such a crucial moment, to come and not refuse their son. But Roger understood that if he gave in to her pleas again, he would never be able to break free from her grasp. Hey son. Feeling down, his father entered the office. Lately, Roger barely recognized him. He was always in high spirits, completely unfazed by the fact that he wasn't allowed to see his only granddaughter. Hey, Roger replied. I've come to tell you that yesterday I filed the papers. In short, your mother and I are getting divorced. Roger couldn't quite comprehend anything. He looked at his father. At 50, he looked great and took care of himself. Now, he sat across from him in a neatly pressed sky blue shirt, an expensive suit, with a smile on his face. And also, he paused, then continued. You'll have to switch to another position. You'll be the sales manager for our products. After Christmas, my future wife, and by the way, your little sister's mom, will take your place. His father smiled. He squinted his eyes. He always did that when he was preparing for a serious conversation. Carolyn and I have been together for a long time. She gave birth to my daughter. She's 3 years old. Carolyn is really looking forward to starting work. You should understand me. You have 2 families yourself. By the way, if I were you, I'd stop chasing after Nancy and hoping she'll forgive you. My advice to you, take a closer look at Julia. She gave birth to your son. When Carolyn gave birth to Rita, I was indifferent at first too, but then I even liked it. Young wife, little daughter. It grew on me. His father fell silent abruptly. He tapped his fingers on the desk and slumped into the chair. Does Mom know yet? Roger asked. Roger glanced around the spacious office they were in. Modern decor, a large conference table. The sales department head's office was much smaller, as was the salary. It was offensive that his father was willing to demote his own son for his mistress. And Mom. Roger remembered how they started the business together, how his mother rejoiced when Roger joined them after college. A year later, she put him in charge and decided to take an early retirement. She knows we're getting divorced. I haven't told her yet that Carolyn is joining us at work. Let her get used to that idea first. And Roger, don't worry. I won't mistreat you. Your salary will remain the same. And if Carolyn can't handle it, I'll transfer you back to being my deputy. His father stood up, adjusted his jacket, loosened his tie, unbuttoned the top button. Well, I'm off. Keep in mind that after Christmas, Carolyn will be sitting in this office. As his father spoke, Roger tried not to lose his composure, to keep himself together and think logically. I understand you, Dad. Clearing the way for yourself and your young chick. But I doubt you'll succeed. The company isn't solely yours. 50% belongs to Mom. And don't think you can just boss around here. I won't allow you to bring your mistress into our family business. Now, Roger looked at his father differently. Before him stood a completely different person, ready to easily erase not only his mother, but also him from his life. I'm ready to buy out your mother's share, his father said calmly. I doubt Mom will agree. But don't worry, the court will divide all the property, and the lawyer will dig into where you're going to get the money to buy out Mom's share. If necessary, I'll help him. Patience snapped. Roger couldn't listen anymore. His father was trying every possible way to justify himself, pressing that Roger himself wasn't an angel and should understand. Son, I'm not your enemy. You're a man too. You should understand that love fades over time. Let's just be friends. No matter what happens, I won't hurt you. We'll divorce your mother, and she'll sell me her share, and you'll keep working with me as before. You're not losing anything, his father insisted. Roger smirked. The thought of a boomerang flashed in his mind. It was all correct. He betrayed his wife, the mother of his child, and now his father was treating him the same way. He never thought he would feel betrayed by his own family, the dearest people to his heart. No, Dad, you're mistaken. From this moment on, we're on opposite sides of the barricade. Thanks for sharing your plan with me. Don't even hope for it. Until the division of property, I won't give up my position to your girlfriend. And, yes, I made a mistake. I admit I was wrong. I hurt my wife. But I'm not like you. I'll try to make amends, to earn Nancy's trust again and the opportunity to raise my daughter. I'm not interested in other women like your Carolyn and Julia, because I'm sure they've crawled into your family today, and tomorrow they'll bring another mess to your bed. And now get out of my office. And I don't want to see your girlfriend here until the divorce from Mom, Roger retorted. And what if? His father smirked. Roger shook his head, smirking back. You'll see. I'm not a fool. I won't be sharing my plans with you. You're making a mistake, son. It's better not to quarrel with me, or you might end up not only without a wife, but also without a job. Think about it. His father warned before turning around and swiftly leaving the office. Roger smirked crookedly. He had long noticed how much his father had changed. Something had to be done urgently. He had to save the family business, which they would soon start dividing, and it would only burst at the seams because of it. The phone rang again. Seeing pictures of his son with Julia, he deleted them without remorse and dialed her number. "I won't come. You don't need to call me anymore. My attitude towards your son and you won't change," he said coldly. There were sobs on the other end of the line, but not a single muscle on Roger's face twitched. "We'll still wait," Julia said tearfully. "You'll have to wait for a long time," Roger replied, ending the call. After the conversation with his father, he simply hated women ready to step on others' heads for their own goals. One such woman had long been lying in his father's bed, and he didn't care about having a family. Not at all concerning Carolyn. 5 minutes later, Roger was dialing his mother's number. "Mom, get ready and come to the office urgently." "Son, I can't. I don't have the strength," came a heavy sigh from the other end of the line. "If you want to save the family business, you'll find the strength. Father has been up to something behind your back. Anyway, it's not a phone conversation. I'll be waiting for you in the office," Roger urged. An hour and a half later, his mother, Felicity, sat in Roger's office, listening to him, blinking bewilderedly, and shaking her head in astonishment. After the conversation with Roger, his father left and went somewhere. When he returned, he learned from the secretary that the company was undergoing an audit. As a result of the audit, it turned out that their beloved daddy secretly introduced the position of a personal consultant into the staff schedule. And for 3 years, the accountant had been monthly transferring a pretty decent salary to her. Besides, Carolyn was receiving bonuses. "Are you happy?" Father entered Roger's office just as he was reviewing the audit results. Even in the small list that had been emailed to him, the numbers were impressive. Roger tore his gaze away from the monitor, leaned back in his chair. Not seeing his father's usual satisfied smile, he smirked himself. "Why don't I see joy on your face?" Roger jabbed. "Tell your girlfriend not to hope for anything. First, you'll return to Mom and me everything you've spent on your second family. It seems you spared no expense for her. You were giving her bonuses twice as much as your own son. But that wasn't enough for her. She wanted power. So, to keep her out of my sight, thank you for your concern, son. But I have a counter-offer for you. Vacate my mother's apartment. She left it to me in her will. Thank God I didn't transfer it to you." Roger looked at his father. It was impossible to shake off the feeling that a bucket of garbage had been poured over him. "Fine, I'll vacate the apartment, but you'll have to reimburse us for the repairs. I'll provide you with the receipts." "Provide them," his father said angrily. Roger could see his father barely holding back from rushing at him with fists clenched. But it amused him. "Carolyn, Rita, and I have decided to fly to the islands for Christmas. I put the apartment up for sale yesterday. Hopefully, you won't be there when we arrive." His father looked at Roger for a few seconds, as if he wanted to add something more, but abruptly changed his mind. He turned around and headed for the exit. Roger decided not to delay the move. Being alone in the apartment was unbearable. Everything reminded him of Nancy. Alone in the evenings, he remembered how they prepared for Molly's birth. He felt guilt and still held on to hope, at least to talk, to explain that he couldn't confess because he was worried about her well-being. Her face full of hatred still lingered in his mind. "It's okay, son. As soon as we settle things with your father, we'll buy a new apartment for you and Nancy. We'll take everything from him. Then we'll see how that scoundrel's lover will love him." His mother reassured him. Life without his father wasn't as scary as he thought. After he filed for divorce, only a few days passed before his mom stopped crying at night. After Roger refused to meet Julia from the maternity hospital, she stopped calling, texting, or sending photos of their son. He could only dream that she would finally leave him alone. But deep down, he hoped that the DNA test would still show a negative result. "I don't need the apartment for now. I'll live with you. It's more fun together," Roger said. Roger sighed heavily. Just a month ago, he and his mom couldn't even imagine spending Christmas alone. In a moment, everything around them would collapse. There would come a time when loved ones would turn away from them, and he and his father would become sworn enemies. On December 24th, it was a shortened day at work. His father flew on vacation yesterday. After congratulating the employees on the holiday, Roger came home, dreaming of going to bed early and not experiencing the holiday for the first time in his life. Entering the hallway, he heard his mom talking to someone. "Nancy, can Roger and I come to at least have a look at the granddaughter?" his mother said over the loudspeaker. Roger held his breath, quietly took off his shoes, and went into the kitchen. His mother was sitting on a chair, talking on the speakerphone with Nancy. It felt like she was worried. She gestured for him not to interfere. An oppressive silence fell in the kitchen. Roger was absolutely sure that his wife wouldn't allow them in again, saying she wasn't ready for a serious conversation yet. "Come over," Nancy replied. It felt like his heart leaped out of his chest, and the only thought spinning in his head was what to give his wife and daughter. Nancy hung up. She looked at her bewildered mother. Literally yesterday, she didn't even want to think about her husband and his parents. She had no intention of talking to them, let alone showing Molly to them. Maybe the holiday, which she adored since childhood, had an effect on her. Nancy herself didn't know why she did it, but hearing that her mother was talking to her mother-in-law, she passed on her greetings. And when Felicity asked for permission to visit her granddaughter, she couldn't refuse. His mother-in-law suggested celebrating Christmas together, but Nancy decided that celebrating the holiday with Roger was already too much and allowed them to come the next day. At exactly 2 o'clock, Roger's car pulled up to the house. The parents exchanged glances. Peter put on his jacket and went outside. If it were up to him, he wouldn't have let such a son-in-law in. But since his daughter allowed it, he opened the gate and let the car into the yard. For Molly, they brought 3 packs of diapers, a jumpsuit, and a huge teddy bear. A whole package of different onesies, bodysuits. Roger hastily grabbed everything in the store yesterday that pleased the eye. After washing their hands, Roger and Felicity immediately went to the room where Molly slept. "She's grown so much," whispered Roger. "What a beauty. She looks like me," remarked Felicity, and everyone smiled. Roger kept glancing at Nancy. Even though she didn't have a speck of makeup on her face and was dressed in a casual suit, becoming a mother had made her incredibly beautiful. She gained inner confidence and became a completely different person. Eliza invited everyone to the festive table. Roger was quieter at the table. He avoided eye contact and constantly pulled Nancy into the room to finally be alone and talk calmly. "Why are you shy, Roger? Speak up in front of everyone. Our daughter has no secrets from us." Eliza couldn't hold back. "How's your son doing? I hope you've already picked them up from the maternity hospital." "No, I didn't pick them up from the maternity hospital. I've never seen my son and don't want to," Roger replied. Everyone fell silent. They stared at Roger with astonished eyes. Peter chuckled loudly, shook his head, but didn't say anything. "I love Nancy, and besides my wife and daughter, I don't need anyone else," Roger said. Peter couldn't hold back, pushed the napkin aside. "What about before, when you cheated on your pregnant wife behind her back? If you're interested in my opinion, I don't believe you. You've never seen your son. You were running around the maternity ward, arranging a private room for your girlfriend. It's a pity there weren't any available. Otherwise you would have housed all your wives nearby. Convenient. First one, then the other." Roger blushed, while Eliza nodded in agreement, and Nancy, looking away, thought that she didn't need to say anything anymore. Her thoughts had been voiced aloud by her father. "I don't deny it. I'm guilty. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I honestly say that I don't communicate with Julia. I'll talk to her only after the DNA test because I doubt that he's my son." "Why are you silent, daughter?" her mother asked. "What's there to say?" Everything is clear and understandable. Roger had a son. It's unpleasant to realize that for my husband, I turned out to be just one of many. The most offensive thing is that if Julia had given birth to a son on time, I still wouldn't have known anything about it. Am I not right? Dropping his head down, Roger remained silent. Felicity stood up for her son. I'm not defending Roger. I found myself in a similar situation. Literally before Christmas, my husband announced that he had another family long ago. Now my son has felt all the delights of betrayal from the closest and dearest person. He understood how painful and hurtful it is. Dad is tearing and throwing around right now. He already took the apartment from his son, thinking he needs it more now. So we got our share too. With a heavy sigh, Felicity covered Nancy's hand with her own. Nancy, you should know that I will always be on your side. You can always come to me for help. I understand that you don't trust my son, but he really doesn't communicate with Julia. After you found out about his adventures, he hasn't seen her once, and I don't want to know anything about her either. Nancy listened to her mother-in-law and didn't understand a thing. Roger had deceived her for so long, catering to the whims of his pregnant mistress. And now he abruptly changed his mind and stopped communicating with her altogether. Can this really happen? Roger, Felicity, thank you for coming. I won't hide it. Despite the hurt, I'm glad that Roger doesn't forget about his daughter. But I'll be straightforward. Right after the holidays, I'll file for divorce. You can come to see Molly, but don't expect us to be together, Nancy said, looking at the wall clock and then scanning the guests. I'm sorry, but I can't give you any more time. Molly slept poorly today. I'll feed her now and want to rest a bit. Please, don't disturb me, she added after bidding everyone goodbye. Nancy herself didn't understand how she managed to calmly deliver her speech, get up, and leave for her room. She really wanted to go back, but she knew she shouldn't. Once you lie once, you'll lie twice. Ron, Carolyn, and Rita had been lounging by the ocean for 3 days already. On the surface, it seemed like living the dream. He had his young wife and daughter by his side. But after an unpleasant conversation with his son, there was no joy. Ron didn't want to take the apartment away from him. But when Carolyn found out they wouldn't be paying her salary anymore, she got so angry that he had to evict Roger from the apartment. Just the thought of having to argue with his son again after the holiday made his body crawl with the knees, and he didn't want to go back to work. Ron looked at his daughter and smiled. She was the joy of his life. Today, Carolyn was in a bad mood again. She sent them to the beach and decided to stay in the room, citing a headache, to lie down in a cool bath. 3 hours had passed, and Carolyn still hadn't shown up. Leaving Rita with the neighbors, Ron decided to walk back to the hotel. Upon entering the room, he immediately realized that his beloved was lying in the bathtub, talking on the phone. Yeah, idiot. Who asked him to leave his wife? He moved his stuff to me. Let him wash his own shirts now. I didn't sign up to be a housewife. Each word from Carolyn felt like a hammer blow to Ron's head. He stood by the door, listening to his beloved, unable to believe she had the conscience to say such things about him. I'm putting up with it. What else can I do? He put his son's apartment up for sale. It's a small place. I think it'll sell quickly. I'll take the money from him and put it in my account. At least there'll be some compensation for spending my youth on this old man. Carolyn laughed. Then she abruptly stopped, as if she were pondering something, and after a brief pause, continued. I wouldn't have minded if everything had stayed the same, but he didn't even have the brains to set things up so no one could dig into anything. He should have prepared first, provided for Rita and me for the rest of our lives, and then split up with his wife. I told him not to rush. Now because of that idiot, I have to meet Jack at the hotel. To calm his own tremble, Ron had to fold his arms across his chest. I thought he'd set me up in a job with him, and I'd be a business lady. I will charm his son. So what? I'd gladly trade him for his son. Ron couldn't listen anymore. He needed to open the door, enter the bathroom, and tell Carolyn to watch her tongue and not dare speak about him like that behind his back. But his tongue felt numb. Taking a few steps, Ron opened the door and left the room. His mind buzzed with various thoughts. Barely moving his feet, he headed to the beach. He looked closely at his daughter. Rita was building some sort of tower out of sand. Ron noted to himself that she was nothing like him and, for the first time, doubted his paternity. The doorbell rang. Felicity went to open the door while Roger sat in his armchair, engrossed in his phone. "Hello. My son and I came to see Grandma." "Felicity, don't you think it's time to meet your grandson?" Julia flashed a smile, but Felicity responded with a disdainful look. Julia held her infant son in her arms. She opened her mouth to speak, but at that moment, Roger approached the door. "Why did you come?" He grumbled discontentedly. "Perhaps you could let me in," Julia suggested. Julia forgave Roger for not coming to pick them up from the maternity ward. She had given him time to sort himself out, but days had passed, and nothing had changed. Roger didn't call, didn't congratulate them on their son's birth. It was becoming outrageous. Every patience has its limits. "Come in," Roger snorted, stepping over the threshold. Julia handed him the baby. "Take your son. Gregory is too hot. He needs to be undressed urgently." Julia had hoped Felicity's heart would soften, and she wouldn't send the grandson back. But her plan didn't work. Roger was still angry and refused to acknowledge his son. "I'll order a taxi for you now, and you'll go back. And don't even think of objecting. If you still haven't understood anything, let me repeat. Neither you nor your child are wanted here. Have you lost all sense of decency? This is your son, and you're obligated to support him. Felicity, explain it to him." Julia looked at Felicity, still hoping she could influence her son. Coming here, Julia was sure they would become friends. "Have a seat. Roger will call a taxi now. I hope it arrives quickly so the child doesn't overheat," said Mom. Julia sat down on a chair, watching as her child's father called a taxi, astonished that no one paid attention to Gregory. "You can go now. The taxi is waiting for you downstairs," Roger said calmly. Julia was speechless at his audacity. Throughout her pregnancy, he had remained silent, claiming he had no intention of divorcing. He had promised he loved his wife and would never leave her. Despite being angry, he indulged her whims. But as soon as Nancy found out he had another family, Roger changed. Picking up a dirty shoe from the floor, Julia hurled it with all her might. "You scoundrel. You want to stay clean, but you won't succeed. Gregory is your son, and parents are obligated to support their minor children. I'll go to court to establish paternity. There's no way out for you. You'll pay child support. If you don't understand nicely, we'll do it the hard way." Julia was only holding back because of the child. If it weren't for Gregory, his daddy would have a hard time. "How shameless you are. What kind of heart do you have not to even glance at your own grandson? But never mind. You'll dance to my tune yet." Julia smirked, decided to blame me. "But my dear, I didn't force you to take off your pants. You handled that task perfectly well yourself." "Are you done?" Roger asked. "Go on, your taxi is waiting. Go to court. If you can prove the child is mine, I'll pay child support. And how many times do I have to tell you not to chase after me and degrade yourself? Spend that time finding another man. Just a piece of advice. Next time, pick one who's not married." Roger closed the door behind Julia. "Mom, I've caused so much trouble that Nancy probably will never forgive me. I've brought so much dirt into our relationship. Only when I found out my dad had another family did I understand how awful and disgusting it is. My poor wife. She's been through so much," Roger confessed. By evening, both of them had already recovered from Julia's emotional visit. Roger sat in his armchair, watching TV. Suddenly, His mother approached him. "Son, Aunt Liana called. She invited me to go to the islands with her. The flight is tomorrow evening. Will you mind if I leave you alone?" Felicity said, "I need to unwind after this divorce." "Mom, what kind of question is that?" "Of course, go ahead," he replied, tearing his gaze away from the TV, turning his head, and smiling. Ron sat on the lounger, watching Rita, unsure of what to do. Should he confront Carolyn about everything? Get into an argument? Ask the reception to move him to another room? Or pretend he didn't hear anything? Going back home, packing his things, and moving to his son's apartment. How fortunate he didn't sell it. He would have to do a DNA test. His heart sank with heart. He had been so proud when his young lover gave birth to their daughter. But what if? No, Ron didn't want to think about that. He loved Rita so much. He was ready to do anything for her. Ron walked with Rita to the room. The hotel didn't seem so wonderful anymore. Everything around irritated and angered him. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't contain his anger. It felt so unfair. Taking a deep breath, Ron opened the door. Carolyn was lying on the bed, texting someone. His nerves were on edge. Unable to cope with his emotions any longer, he casually tossed his beach bag onto the floor, chatting with Jack. He couldn't hold back, seeing his contorted face twisted with anger. Carolyn snapped out of her reverie, eyes widening in surprise. She instantly jumped up. She received a message, but Carolyn didn't bother to read it. Reply, or should I? He reached for the phone. "Darling, you must have got overheated in the sun." Messages kept coming to the phone, but Carolyn paid them no attention. "How could you? I did everything for you too. And you," Ron smirked bitterly, "wanted to become a business lady. Decided to trade me for my son. And who are you after that? A heartless woman." Ron tried to speak calmly, but inside, he seethed with hatred and injustice. "Where did you get that idea?" Carolyn bit her lip. Did her friend betray her? How could he know about their conversation? "I came to the room and heard you complaining to your friend about me, calling me an old man." Hearing his words, Carolyn scooped Rita into her arms, and Ron, tilting his head up, smirked bitterly. He approached her closely. Carolyn was ready to fight tooth and nail, but she wasn't about to back down. She gently placed Rita on the floor. Carolyn took off her robe. In complete silence, she put on her swimsuit. "Now it's my turn to take a stroll. I'll be back in the evening. Hopefully, by then, you'll have calmed down, and we can talk." Waving to Rita, she left the room, slamming the door loudly behind her. Carolyn went back down to the bar. After Ron overheard her conversation with her friend, they barely spoke to each other. Being in the same room with her lover was unbearable. Every evening, she left him with Rita. Ron constantly grumbled, threatening that once they returned home, he would definitely do a DNA test. But Carolyn paid no heed to his threats. She knew perfectly well that the test would show a negative result. "Excuse me, miss, may we sit at your table?" Two women asked her. Carolyn looked around. There were indeed no empty tables. She silently shook her head. "We just arrived today. We don't know much yet," one of the women said. Carolyn glanced at them. One of their faces seemed very familiar to her. "I hope you'll have a better time than I am." Carolyn slurred. "Why are you alone?" Liana asked. "I had a fight with my lover. Maybe now he'll crawl back to his old wife. Let him go. I don't care. By the way, I'll introduce you to him now." Felicity and Liana sat with their backs to the exit. When Carolyn waved her hand, they didn't turn around. "You're drunk again. The child has a fever, and you're in the bar again. Get ready. Let's go to the room." "How much longer will you keep drinking?" Hearing the familiar voice, Felicity turned her head, met her ex-husband's eyes, but without saying a word, turned away again. Liana's face twisted into a sardonic grin. "Run. Hello. What a meeting. I've longed to meet your young wife." Liana said. Ron fell silent. Seeing Felicity, he wanted to run away. He didn't know where to hide from shame. She's not my wife, he replied. He glared angrily at Carolyn, silently praying she wouldn't blurt out anything unnecessary. If someone had told Ron 10 days ago that he would regret leaving his wife, he would have laughed at them for a long time. I see a familiar face. It turns out we've shared a man for 4.5 years. Carolyn extended her hand in greeting, but Felicity just smirked. Are you on your honeymoon? Liana asked. The situation amused her. Ron tried to drag Carolyn back to the room, but it was difficult. Carolyn was in such a state that she didn't care about her sick daughter. What honeymoon? I haven't even divorced my wife yet, he wanted to add. And maybe I won't, but he kept quiet. He would talk about it privately with Felicity later. Are you coming or staying? Ron addressed Carolyn again. He looked at his wife's smiling face and realized he wasn't in the mood for laughter. The longer he stayed in this company, the more tragic the situation became. Let's just leave things as they are. No one will get divorced. Ron will go back home. You, Felicity, will feed him, wash his clothes, and I'll indulge him. Ron, are you in agreement? You always complained to me about how disgusting it was to share a bed with your wife, Carolyn said mockingly. Ron turned pale, and Carolyn chuckled maliciously. Felicity, put yourself in my shoes. I lost my job, and I haven't even finished paying the mortgage. I have very little left. Oh, Ron, you let me down. You forced me to take out a mortgage, gave me money for the down payment every month. You can stop now. Ron interrupted her. Very interesting. Go on, Carolyn. Felicity encouraged her. Carolyn opened her mouth, but didn't get a chance to say anything. Two men approached the table. Liana had met one of them on the plane. There you are. We thought we'd find you here. Can we sit at your table? Liana's new acquaintance asked her. Ron eyed the men coldly, intending to introduce himself as Felicity's husband. But seeing Carolyn heading for the exit, he sighed heavily and followed her out. Nancy, our school principal is going to the city tomorrow. Would you like to ride along with him? You mentioned needing to stop by work. And Molly, you can grab something. I talked to Brendan. He doesn't mind taking you with him, said Nancy's father. Nancy silently nodded. She didn't want to go to the city with a stranger, but her father's car had broken down. At 9 in the morning, the school principal pulled up to the gates of the house. Seeing Nancy, he got out of the car and opened the front door. Hello, Nancy. I didn't know Peter had such a beautiful daughter, he said. Nancy was embarrassed. She had heard from her parents that a new principal had started at the school this academic year, but she never expected him to be so young. How old could he be? Hello, Brendan. Thanks for taking me along, she said. They rode in silence for about 10 minutes, and only when the car merged onto the highway did Brendan speak again. Driving past your house, I've seen a young man with a beautiful bouquet a few times. Is that your husband? Nancy turned away, staring out the side window. She had no intention of discussing her failed marriage with a stranger. Sorry, I probably shouldn't pry, Brendan said, reaching to turn up the cheerful music. Nancy smiled and shook her head. That's my husband. Well, probably ex-husband now. We're getting divorced, she said. Are you married? Nancy felt herself blush instantly. Brendan didn't rush to answer. Sorry, now I'm prying. You don't have to answer. It's clear enough, she said. What's clear to you? Brendan glanced away from the road to look at Nancy. Never mind. I just found out my husband cheated. So now I'm seeing all men as potential cheaters, Nancy said. Brendan was about to say something, but hearing her words made him pause. The car fell into an uncomfortable silence again. Nancy, I'm divorced. My wife and I were only together for a year. Then I found out she was in love with a married man, he said, pulling over to the side of the road. He stopped the car, turned to her, and stared into her eyes for a long moment. "My wife's name was Julia. She got involved with your husband. As soon as I found out, I filed for divorce. Thankfully, she wasn't pregnant at the time. We got divorced quickly. I moved here to start fresh. To be honest, I was very surprised when I saw my ex-wife's lover with flowers outside your house. So, you and I are misery buddies," he said. "Misery buddies," Nancy repeated thoughtfully. No matter how hard Roger tried to regain her trust, the page of their shared, happy life had been turned. Silence filled the car once again. "Julia gave birth to my husband's son," she whispered almost inaudibly. "I heard from mutual friends. At first, everyone thought the child was mine. I had my doubts too, but based on the timing, it seems that the son is indeed your husband's. The child is definitely not mine," Brendan said, turning away and sighing heavily. Why did he start this unnecessary conversation? Disgusting memories resurfaced in his mind. He had long overcome this. Initially, it was tough, but over time, he erased Julia from his life. "I still can't find the time to file for divorce. Brendan, could you drop me off at the City Court building?" she asked. "No problem," Brendan replied. "Aren't you in a hurry to do it?" "I'm not in a hurry," Nancy replied shortly. Brendan pulled up to the City Court building. He got out of the car with Nancy. "I'll come with you," he said in response to her surprised look. Nancy didn't mind. It turned out that in this complex situation, Brendan had suffered too. As they worked down the corridor, they encountered an unfamiliar girl with a contorted face of anger. "What are you doing here?" she addressed Brendan. "Nancy, meet Julia, my ex-wife and your husband's lover," he said to her, then turned to Julia. "We're here on business. What about you?" Julia smirked fakely. "Oh, Roger spoils me, of course, but I filed for child support. I want to be sure about tomorrow," she said. "Oh, Roger, he tells me something completely different. He begs me to come back to him and doesn't want to hear anything about the son." "Who should we believe?" Nancy said, turning to Brendan. "We don't have much time. We still need to stop by the store. Roger transferred money to me yesterday for a gift for our daughter. Molly's turning a month soon. Don't think for a second that we believe you. Your lover comes to Nancy every day with huge bouquets." Brendan jabbed at his ex-wife. They had nothing more to say. Brendan and Nancy entered the office, while Julia watched them leave with undisguised hatred for a few more minutes. Rita caught a fever. Despite being in a delirious state, Carolyn managed to give the child some pills. Only then, with a sense of duty fulfilled, did she collapse into bed. Ron had no desire to sleep. The unpleasant scene in the bar still lingered in his mind. Knowing Liana, he could imagine the rumors that would circulate about him. Why was he so unlucky? Ron closed his eyes. He wondered if they were still at the bar with those men or if they had dispersed to their rooms. Over the years, he and Felicity had drifted apart. It seemed like love had long faded, and there was no attachment left. But today, as he looked at her, he realized he wouldn't survive seeing her in another man's arms. Until his wife made mistakes that would be hard to fix later, he decided he needed to talk to her. Felicity was a smart woman. She should understand. Ron went downstairs. He entered the bar. The four of them were still sitting at the table, having fun. "Felicity, can I talk to you?" he said quietly. "Why? We need to talk." "About what?" "Ron, go to your young girlfriend." Liana jabbed. "You filed for divorce. Let's talk about it in court." "I don't want to talk to you right now," Felicity said. For a few more minutes, Ron watched from the sidelines as his wife enjoyed herself. He still hoped Felicity loved him. He turned and went back to his room. "Hey, son. Belated happy holidays," Ron said, extending his hand to Roger. But without waiting for a response, he coughed and placed a bottle of whiskey on the table. "Thanks," Roger replied without looking up from his documents. The mood was already as bad as it could get. Mom had left. He had spent all the holidays in front of the TV. He had visited Nancy several times, but his wife was still angry, hardly speaking to him. And last night, Julia called. He answered, and she said she saw Nancy at the city court. Not alone, but with her ex-husband. A nasty premonition hit him, hitting him like a blow to the face. Roger hoped that his wife would quickly get bored at her parents' house. After a while, for their daughter's sake, Nancy would find the strength to give him one last chance. "I wanted to tell you something." His father broke the silence. "I rushed with the apartment. I don't know what came over me. Anyway, you can move your things back. Actually, I moved there yesterday. I left Carolyn. I want to apologize to your mother, and if she's okay with it, I'll move our things back to our apartment." Roger looked up from his papers at his father. "Even like this?" Roger was surprised. "And what about your child? If I'm not mistaken, you boasted that you were raising a daughter." Ron didn't mention that he had given Rita's mug to the lab this morning. In 3 days, the DNA test results would be known. "Help me make amends with Felicity. I don't know what came over me. I left Carolyn. I'm living in your apartment for now." Roger smirked. He hadn't forgotten the day when his father tried to take the company from his mother and then kicked him out of the apartment. He spoke to him in a completely different tone back then. "Take a look." Roger pulled out a document from the folder. "But not all expenses are accounted for. Mom said you bought Carolyn an apartment on mortgage. As part of the debt you owe, you'll transfer part of your share in our company to Mom. That's 15%. So, you'll have 35% left. We won't touch Carolyn's apartment, and in return, you give up your share in our apartment with Mom. Besides, you already have an apartment. I won't return there. It's fair, in my opinion." Roger fell silent. "Is this so important to her?" Ron asked. "That's not all. If you agree to our terms, Mom will run the company. I'll be her deputy, and she'll appoint you as the head of procurement." Ron angrily pushed the document aside. "You've all planned it out well. Maybe I'll take out a loan and pay off my share of the debt. Why should I go to the procurement department? See for yourself. We've made our offer." Roger shrugged. "Son, I understand I'm to blame, but you're far from being a model family man yourself. Everyone makes mistakes. As if you didn't spend money on your mistress." Ron sniped. "I need to think. And do you think if I agree, Mom will be able to forgive me?" He asked uncertainly. "You're asking the wrong person. We haven't discussed this with Mom. But for Mom to forgive you, you need to do a good deed." Roger drove to his wife's place in the evening, rehearsing his speech the whole way. His biggest concern was when she managed to meet Brendan. "Hey," Roger said, handing her the flowers. "I missed you. Will you feed me?" There was a scent of some kind of baking wafting through the house. Roger swallowed loudly. "Wash your hands. Come to the kitchen. Molly is still asleep." His wife's voice didn't bode well. "How was your day?" Was Molly being difficult? There was a sense of unease in the air, as if something terrible was about to happen. "I saw the mother of your son in court today." Nancy smirked. "We unexpectedly ran into each other again. I came to file for divorce, and she was filing for child support." Roger wanted to explain that he has no relationship with Julia. She means nothing to him. But then the front door opened. Nancy's father and Brendan entered the house. Roger recognized him immediately. "Hello, Roger," Peter grumbled. "And I invited Brendan for dinner," he said to Nancy. "Brendan, come on in. Let me introduce you. This is the father of my granddaughter, Roger." "I know your granddaughter's father very well, Nancy. This is for you and Molly," Brendan said, offering her a box of chocolates and a set of colorful rattles under Roger's watchful gaze. "Thanks." Nancy took the gifts and gave her father a displeased look. "Why did he invite Brendan to dinner? Do you two know each other?" Peter raised an eyebrow in surprise. "I personally don't know your son-in-law, but we have mutual acquaintances," Brendan evasively replied. "I see. Peter didn't delve into details. Could someone explain to me what's going on here? Roger couldn't hold back. Peter turned, looked at his son-in-law, frowned. Let's all have dinner together. I invited the school principal over. I have the right to do so. We have things to discuss. If someone doesn't like it, it's not my fault. It's my home, and I have the right to invite whoever I want to see. Sorry, Peter. I didn't know you worked together. Thanks for the invitation, but I've already had dinner. Nancy fed me. I'll go to my daughter. It's time for me to head home soon. Roger apologized. Nancy, once you're free, come to Molly's room. We still need to talk. Roger left the kitchen. While waiting for his wife in the room, he imagined many things. He was most worried that Nancy had found an admirer. Maybe that's why she rushed with the divorce. Why did it take you so long? He said as soon as Nancy entered the room. She deliberately didn't hurry. She decided to play on his nerves. What do you mean? So long? You could have sat at the table with our guest. If you're afraid that Brendan will spill the beans to Dad about how you two know each other, it doesn't mean I should hide with you, she said. Nancy, please, don't remind me of Julia anymore. I don't want to hear anything about her. How many times do I have to tell you that she means nothing to me? These two have surrounded our family and don't let us live in peace. Roger said. It's a pity that such smart thoughts came to your mind too late, Nancy said. Nancy, I'm jealous. Please, be smarter than me. Don't repeat my mistakes. I'm absolutely sure that he's courting you just to get back at me. Nancy pondered. Maybe there was some truth in his words, but she was increasingly angry with her husband. Nancy, promise me you'll think about what I said. No, Roger, I won't promise you anything. She turned away, took a step towards the door. Roger grabbed her and held her in his arms. Do you like him? He asked. I don't know him well enough to make such conclusions, she replied, trying to break free. If you continue like this, you'll forget the way here. Do you understand me? And don't you dare create jealousy scenes with me. You're the one who betrayed me. Her own words made Nancy uncomfortable. She couldn't even think about Brendan. After all, she still loved her husband. If only she could command her heart to stop loving, she would gladly do it. Nancy, I don't want to leave tonight. Can I sleep on the couch? And I'll leave tomorrow morning. It's very late, he asked, and took a deep breath. Stay. What can you do? She said coldly. But this is the first and last time. Next time, don't come so late. No one will let you spend the night here anymore. Presumed paternity, 0%. Ron folded the paternity test results into an envelope with trembling hands. What a mess. He sat in the car, holding his head in his hands. Because of that deceitful woman, he lost his son's trust, argued with his wife, and lost his director's chair. How far had he fallen? Starting the car, Ron knew he had to go to work, to face his son's mocking gaze again and pretend it wasn't time to write him off yet. To be forgiven, you need to do a good deed. He pondered his son's words in his office. He couldn't remember the last time he did something good for his wife and son. Ron left the office and headed to his son. Hi, can we talk? He asked. Sure, Roger replied indifferently. To make amends for my mistakes, I'm willing to agree to all your terms. I'll give Felicity 15% for the debts, but I also want to give you 15%. Maybe by accepting this gift from me, you'll forgive me someday. Are you sure you can afford it? Roger asked in surprise. I don't need much for myself. Just take a look. But don't laugh, Ron said as he tossed the envelope with the negative paternity test result onto the table. Seeing the result, Roger could only shake his head silently. You understand that the final decision rests with Mom, and she's unlikely to forgive you. So before you start throwing around expensive gifts, think it through, Roger advised. I've thought it through. I repeat, even if Felicity doesn't forgive me, I don't need much, Ron repeated. Roger held the envelope with the paternity test result in his hand, speechless. He had been sure he was Gregory's father, Julia's son, and had long resigned himself to paying child support. And now, seeing the result as 0, he was furious, angry with himself, and couldn't understand how he could have gotten involved with such a deceitful and two-faced person. Ron started the car. No, he wouldn't go to work today. First, he would show Julia the test results, remind her not to bother him anymore, and then go straight to his wife. Why did you need this? Are you out of your mind? Your son has a biological father, and you shamelessly try to push him onto me. He threw the test at her. Take a look. Hope you find it interesting. How deceitful you are. Who's Gregory's father? Brendan. Roger squinted. Julia lowered her gaze. How she didn't want to remember the day she slept with Lance, her only friend's husband. She hadn't even noticed how they ended up together. Why did she even go to their house? Because I love you. I fell in love at first sight. I got divorced from my husband. I wanted to be with you forever. Julia whispered softly, holding Gregory close to her chest. What did you hope for? Did you think I would swallow your lies, believe you blindly, and not get a test done? Is this Brendan's son? Roger asked. No, not Brendan's. Gregory's father is happily married to my friend, Julia said. I truly believed Gregory was yours. Roger sighed heavily. It was nauseating to listen to her excuses. Most of all, he felt disgusted with himself and the whole situation he dragged his pregnant wife into. It should have been a little easier. Julia's son had nothing to do with him. But Roger understood perfectly well that this wasn't the kind of situation where he could blame Julia entirely and shake himself off, claiming he wasn't at fault. It was terribly shameful for Nancy to have gone through so much. At a time when she should have been enjoying the happiness of long-awaited motherhood, his wife was forced to cry and hide from people's eyes. And all because of this deceitful woman who decided to impose someone else's child on him. Roger couldn't stand to be near Julia anymore. Roger, wait. Please don't leave. I love you after all. Your wife won't forgive you anyway. Think about it. No one will love you like I do. Remember how good we were together. Let's forget everything and start over, she pleaded. Roger picked up the envelope. Here. He waved the envelope. This is the essence of your love. If you ever come near me or my wife again, I'll file a police report for harassment. I'm not joking. Redirect your relentless energy towards your son's biological father. Or better yet, ask Brendan to take a test just in case. I can't stand to see you anymore. Tears welled up in Julia's eyes. She no longer tried to hold them back. She lowered her head, kissed her son on the cheek. Get out of here. I hope Nancy doesn't forgive you. And to make sure she doesn't fall for your deceitful promises, I'll tell her something. Let her know who she lived with all this time. Roger drove to his wife's house. The threat from Julia still echoed in his mind. In his heart, there was a small hope for a little leniency from Nancy. Yes, he had cheated, but thankfully it had not resulted in consequences. It seemed his suspicions had been justified. It was long overdue to take the test. For the first time in a long while, Roger arrived at his in-laws' house with good news. He grabbed the envelope and a bag of gifts from the passenger seat. To his surprise, the gate was open. He entered the house. No one greeted him. He was about to call for Nancy when he saw Molly Brendan coming out of a room. What are you doing here? Where's Nancy? He asked. Keep it down. You'll wake Molly. Nancy went to the city with Peter. By my calculation, they should be back in about 20 minutes. And Eliza had to run to school. There was a little emergency in her class, Brendan explained, spreading his hands. I had to let Eliza go for a short while, and I stayed back to look after Molly. Brendan smiled, as if nothing serious had happened. He was a family friend and always ready to help. All right, you can go. I'll take care of my child myself, Roger said. No, I've been entrusted to look after the child. Until I personally hand over my duties, I won't leave, Brendan insisted. Ignoring Roger's displeased expression, Brendan turned and headed to Molly's room. Roger followed him. Listen, Roger whispered. What are you doing hovering around my wife? What do you want from her? Trying to get back at me this way? It won't work. By the way, I've taken a DNA testament. I have no relation to your ex-wife's son. If you don't believe me, you can see the test results. He watched Brendan read the test results with interest. Hearing the sound of the front door closing, they both walked out to the hallway. Roger saw Nancy, looking entirely different, smiling with radiant eyes. Brendan, thank you so much. When Mom called and said she left Molly with you, I was flustered and didn't know how to react to her words, Nancy said, quickly changing clothes and checking on her daughter. Nancy smiled upon seeing that Molly was fine. They conversed among themselves, paying no attention to Roger. Nancy, we can let our nanny go. Thank you, Brendan, for helping us out. If we need your services again, we'll definitely reach out, Roger said. No, number Brendan, stay for dinner. We must find a way to thank you, Peter said from the doorway. Roger looked at his wife and didn't recognize her at all. He hadn't seen her for several days and noticed that Nancy had changed significantly during this short time. Her postpartum belly had completely disappeared. Her face was glowing with color. She became more sensual, feminine, and looked better than before giving birth. But the most important thing was that the sadness had disappeared from her face. Sitting at the dinner table, Roger tried to keep the conversation going, smiling. He subtly observed Nancy with Brendan. He didn't notice anything strange for himself, but inside, a feeling of inexplicable unease kept stirring endlessly. Nancy's parents finished dinner and went to tidy up in the kitchen. Everyone else remained at the table. Roger took out the test from his inner pocket and placed the envelope in front of Nancy. You can take a look. I specifically came to show you. I am not the father of Julia's son, he said, pushing the envelope toward her. Why did you bring it to me? Nancy pushed the envelope aside. I thought you might be interested. Roger's eyes flashed with surprise. Do you really think this test can influence my decision to divorce you? Roger, you're just wasting your precious time, Nancy said calmly. But Roger felt a ringing in his ears. I just want to remind you that Brendan might be the father of Julia's son, Roger said. Sandby. Brendan broke his silence. I saw Julia's medical records with my own eyes. At the time she got pregnant, we hadn't talked for a month and were sleeping separately. I would still take the test if I were you. Doctors sometimes make mistakes, Roger sniped. I don't like you hovering around my wife. We're going through a difficult period, so you shouldn't constantly be around. Try to keep your distance from Nancy as much as possible. Otherwise, my patience might just snap one day. Are you threatening me? I'm not threatening. Just warning for now. Roger, can you stop with the nonsense? Brendan works at the school with my parents. He lives nearby. If Nancy hadn't intervened in time, Brendan probably wouldn't have held back and openly admitted that he really liked Nancy. Roger couldn't care less. Brendan got up from the table. I have to go. Nancy, thank you. The dinner was delicious. Thank you, Brendan, for helping us out. Drop by anytime. We're always glad to see you. Her words twisted Roger's insides into a huge knot. Just remember, when you come over, Nancy is still married, Roger said. Nancy, don't you notice that he's flirting with you? I'm tired of watching this. How long can this go on? I understand I'm at fault, but can't you forgive me and give us another chance for Molly's sake? Let's go to the city. I promise you won't regret it. If you disagree, I'll take a leave and move in with you and Molly for a month, because I refuse to stand aside and watch as the woman I love is taken away from me. If you threaten Brendan again, forget about ever coming here again. I won't blush because of you in front of a decent person anymore. And now, take your test and leave. No one will let you stay overnight here anymore. And drop your utopian idea of saving our marriage. I repeat, I will never be able to forgive infidelity. Felicity looked at Ron and couldn't understand how she had managed to live with him for so many years. So, what did you want to talk about? Today was her first day back at work. She thought Ron would be upset about being moved to a small corner in the supply department. But to her surprise, Ron pretended to be satisfied. Roger probably talked to you. I want to somewhat make up for my guilt and give you and our son 15% of my share. It was amusing to watch him. Where had his smug face, arrogance, and self-centeredness gone? And what's stopping you? I'm fine with it. Good job. Finally, remembering our son. Just a warning, though, we're not revisiting this topic. Work will be the only thing connecting us. Felicity paused, took a breath. So, have you changed your mind about handing out your belated Christmas presents? I've already talked to our son, and I'm ready to repeat it personally for you. I don't need too much. 20% will do. That's great. Felicity praised him. Let's deal with this issue today. For several days, Julia had been contemplating how to tell Lance that he had become a father for the 4th time. If she hadn't noticed any resemblance between them before, now she clearly saw that the oval of the face, the eye color, and even the slightly noticeable birthmark on Gregory's neck reminded her of that fateful evening at her friend's house. Oh, come on. Lance opened the door. Seeing him, Julia sighed heavily. She deliberately came on a day off to calmly talk and possibly repent to her only friend. Hoping to be understood, the kids are at Grandmaster Day, and Erica went to the store. She'll be back soon. Come in. Let's undress your Gregory. Let's see your son. We've never seen him before. Who does he resemble? Lance asked. Lance, just don't worry. I must tell you that Gregory is your son. He stood with his mouth agape and couldn't make sense of anything. Be careful what you say. It's good that your wife isn't home. Julia shook her head. Gregory, puckering his lips, looked up at the ceiling. To dispel Lance's doubts, it was necessary to show the birthmark on the child's neck. Don't look at me like that. I'm shocked myself. I was sure the child was Roger's, but he brought me a DNA test yesterday, which said the degree of relatedness is 0%. Putting Gregory on the couch, Julia wearily sank into a chair. She watched Lance, whose eyes widened, trembling with fear as he looked at the child. What are you going to do? I hope you won't tell Erica about this, he asked. Why should I keep silent? Sooner or later, your wife will find out anyway. As soon as she sees the birthmark, she'll immediately guess who the father of my child is. I understand you have 3 children of your own, but I'm not going to hide the biological father from my son. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't even hear Erica enter the apartment. Am I understanding this correctly? She interjected. While I'm raising your 3 children, you're behind my back. Erica couldn't continue. Friend, I'm so sorry. Julia spoke in a measured, calm tone about things Erica hadn't dared to think about. Lance remained silent, looking at his wife with dull eyes, as if he had buried his happy marriage along with her. With glassy eyes, Erica first glanced at her husband, then slowly shifted her gaze to the child she had longed to see, but now couldn't even bear to look at. Take your child and get out of here, and make sure I never see you again. Erica, please forgive me. Lance got down on his knees before her. It was a one-time thing. We were drunk. I don't need her or her child. Get out, all of you. I hate you all, Erica snapped, slapping Lance hard. We'll talk later, she said to him. And you, get out of here, she told Julia. What's the point of shouting? Wouldn't it be better for us to sit down and talk calmly? Julia suggested. Your lover will be thrown out of the apartment right after you. You can wait for him in the hallway. Then it's up to you. Meet, talk, raise your Gregory. I won't care anymore. Julia left the apartment in 5 minutes. Now Erica had to deal with Lance. She brought out a suitcase and began to pack her husband's things. Erica, let's talk calmly. Okay, I'm not going anywhere. Think about it. We have 3 children. You can't handle them alone. Let him prove first that it's my child. He followed her closely, feeling icy dread that his wife would kick him out. Erica closed the suitcase and pushed it towards the door. This should be enough for now. Now, gather your things and leave, she said firmly. I told you, I'm not leaving until you listen to me. Lance slumped into a chair. His wife opened the balcony door and tossed the suitcase off the balcony. What are you doing? He exclaimed. If you don't leave, all your things will be lying under our windows. Your choice. Fine. Calm down. I'll go to my parents now. I spend the weekend with them. You'll calm down. And on Sunday, I'll come back and we'll talk peacefully. Hello, Peter. Felicity stepped out of the car and handed him a bag of gifts. I've come for a visit. Hope you won't turn me away. We're always happy to have guests. He opened the gate. Seeing the esteemed guest, Eliza immediately began setting the table. Nancy, I've come to talk to you. Just to be clear, Roger knows nothing about this. Everything I'm about to say is solely my initiative. Felicity sighed heavily. The conversation ahead was going to be tough. Nancy, you know how I feel about you. I love you like my own daughter. I feel sorry for my son. I see he's suffering. I understand he's to blame. Nancy, maybe you'll give him another chance. You love each other. I'm not justifying Roger, but I see he's realized his mistake. I'm sure he won't dare to do it again. Nancy just shook her head. To protect you, I want to suggest moral damages. You buy a flat, draw up a prenuptial agreement with a notary, stating that the property will be owned by the wife only, and only after that, you agree to reconcile. Felicity proposed. Having voiced her proposal aloud, Felicity didn't rush Nancy for an answer. As a woman, she understood her well. Although Nancy tried to put on an impassive mask, Felicity felt that despite everything, the children still loved each other. The offer is certainly tempting. Having your own flat is wonderful, Nancy replied. Come with me to the city today. You'll stay for a while, and if you realize you can't forgive Roger, you can come back. If you don't want to go with me today, just call. We'll come for you anytime. Felicity persisted. Silence fell in the kitchen again. Felicity knew she was pressuring Nancy with her authority, but there was nothing left to lose. Roger had wasted away from worry. He became nervous and constantly dissatisfied. Peter, what do you think about this? Felicity asked. I'm against it, but I'll accept whatever decision my daughter makes. He replied. I'll agree with my husband. Eliza said with a heavy sigh. The decision is yours, Nancy, Felicity said. Nancy rubbed her forehead. The inner voice whispered that it was worth a try. But just the thought of possibly having to sleep with him again sent shivers down her spine. Nancy, you're not losing anything. You'll live with Molly in a separate room. If you realize you can't forgive Roger, you can gather your things and leave at any time. Felicity reassured. I agree to stay with you for a while. But just so you know, it doesn't mean I've forgiven my husband. Consider it merely out of respect for you, Nancy replied. Eliza raised an eyebrow in surprise. Peter rolled his eyes. Well, until you change your mind, shall we start getting ready? Felicity asked. Okay, I'll go get ready. Nancy smiled in response. After kicking her husband out, Erica locked the front door. She slid down the wall to the floor, burying her face in her knees, and burst into tears. It was hard to be disappointed in the father of her children. She always thought of her husband as her support, a reliable friend. But now she was left alone with 3 kids. The phone kept ringing incessantly. Lance sent text messages, but she didn't want to read them. She simply added his number to the block list. Someone rang the doorbell. You have a delivery. The courier handed her a slip and a pen. After she signed, he gave her a bouquet of flowers and left. Erica, forgive me. You can kick me out, But I won't leave. Because I love you. Don't even think about divorce. I won't let you go anywhere. Just think, where would we be without each other? Erica read the note. She opened the balcony door again. Looked down. Lance stood near the entrance, tilting his head up. Erica threw the bouquet at him. Let him choke on it. Inside, there was a sharp need to quickly pack up her husband's remaining things, arrange for delivery, and send the bags to his parents. Clean the house thoroughly. And starting tomorrow, start thinking about life as a single mother of 3. She caught herself thinking that she might have forgiven her husband for a one-time betrayal, but she would never forgive Gregory. The likelihood of Lance being Gregory's father was 99.998%. The tiny hope that Lance wasn't Gregory's father collapsed like a house of cards. On the brink of divorce, Erica realized there was no turning back. For the first 2 days, Lance kept calling, lurking near the entrance. Finally, she gathered the courage to talk to him and asked for time to gather her strength and think. Her mom took just 5 minutes to figure everything out. Seeing Erica's tear-streaked face, she took the kids with her. She advised Erica not to mope around, but to take care of herself and never fall into depression. Erica sat in the chair, holding a glass of wine, her mind swirling with the image of her beloved husband pleasuring her friend. A knock on the door snapped her out of her reverie. Erica got up, approached the door, looked through the peephole. Lance, why are you here? I asked you not to bother me. Darling, I can't take it anymore. I'm going crazy. He got down on his knees again, clasped her legs with his arms. Erica, forgive me, fool. It won't happen again. Let's go to the living room. I'll show you a very interesting document, Erica said. Read it. She pointed to the envelope. Did you take a test? Her husband asked. He quickly skimmed through the text. Seeing the positive result, he shook his head, pinching the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers. Let's have some tea. I brought a cake. I hope you won't throw it off the balcony. With a cold and indifferent gaze, she watched Lance. He boiled the kettle, took the cake out of the box. Erica, I'm very sorry, but unfortunately, I can't change anything now. We have to accept that our girls have a little brother and move on, he said, looking at her with regret. Erica glanced at her half-empty glass of wine. She grabbed the glass and splashed the remaining wine in his face. Feeling better, he asked, Tell me, what do I need to do for you to forgive me? We can't put the son back where he came from. We'll have to live with this fact. She caught sight of a wooden skittle. Erica grabbed it and then struck Lance on the shoulder. Feeling better, maybe we can talk calmly now. He extended his hand to take the skittle, but Erica swung again, hitting him in the groin. Lost your mind. Lance doubled over in pain, clutching his groin, thinking that the cheater got what he deserved. Erica finally calmed down. Get out of here. Raise your son, jerk. I don't want to see you. Tomorrow I'll file for divorce, Erica said and slammed the door behind him. Roger picked up a rosy-cheeked Molly after her bath and handed her to Nancy, who wrapped her in a towel. Since the evening Felicity and he came home, it felt like Roger had been replaced. He was overjoyed that his wife would now be with him. However, everything was still unclear. They lived like neighbors, helping each other, sitting together at the table, laughing, joking. But as soon as Roger subtly broached the topic of wanting to live a full family life, Nancy would either retreat to her room or start packing to go to her parents. Getting ready for bed. Nancy had already made the bed. Seeing her husband in the room, she sighed heavily. She was tired of all this. Every evening was the same. Nancy, we're going to see an apartment tomorrow. He sat down on the bed, opened his tablet, and when she sat down beside him and looked at the screen, he began enthusiastically explaining the layout. Do you like it? I do. And you? The main thing is for you to like it. You'll be the mistress of the apartment, he replied with a smile. Roger, maybe we shouldn't rush, Nancy suggested. I want us to live separately from my mom. I hope I'll never disappoint you again, and you'll never have a reason to kick me out of your apartment." Roger kissed Nancy on the temple. To his surprise, she didn't push him away. "Go to bed. Tomorrow, Mom will look after Molly, and we'll go see the apartment." Roger kissed Nancy on the temple again, wished her a good night, and left. Nancy couldn't sleep. Silly thoughts crept into her head. It seemed that Roger was trying to make up for his guilt this way, and she was hardly resisting. But on the other hand, if her mother-in-law hadn't made her such a favorable offer, she would never have given Roger another chance. At 6 in the morning, Nancy breastfed Molly and put her back to sleep. Before leaving the room, she sighed, opened the door, and immediately saw Roger. "Are you awake? Go wash up. I'll go to the kitchen and make us breakfast." He kissed her on the temple again. And finally, Nancy relaxed and smiled. "I'll agree to this deal only if you swear you'll never treat me like that again." She looked him in the eye, afraid to admit to herself that despite the hurt, she missed him deeply. "I swear I'll never do it again." He nodded. Nancy wanted to believe him, but there were still some doubts nagging at her. "I'm warning you now. No complaints. If, God forbid, I have to, I'll gather all your things and kick you out of my apartment," she said. Roger smiled sweetly. "For the sake of being with you, I agree to all your conditions. Trust me. I promise I'll never disappoint you again in my life." She's filing for divorce tomorrow. If the wife hopes I'll leave her alone, she's mistaken. We bought the apartment together, so she shouldn't count on it. I'll come by in a couple of days, and if someone doesn't like it, she can leave, but without the kids," Lance said, frustration evident in his voice as he pounded his hand on the steering wheel. Divorcing Erica wasn't part of his plans. They had 3 kids, and if his wife thought that because of one little affair, she had the right to deprive their daughters of their father, she was sorely mistaken. Lost in anger, Lance didn't realize he was driving towards Julia's apartment. He sighed heavily again. His son didn't fit into his plans at all. He understood that the child wasn't to blame, but what could he do when he had such a foolish mother? "Hey," he said, seeing Julia's surprised face. "Dad's here," she said sarcastically as she let him into the apartment. "Has your conscience finally kicked in? Want to give your son some money?" "What money? You know I transfer all my salary to my wife. I don't have any money." "Better tell me. Why did you spill everything?" "Because of you. I have problems with my wife. I've been thinking. You need to leave. Go to your parents." "What are you going to do here alone with the kid?" he said. "Erica kicked me out of the house and is filing for divorce." "Well, yes, it's all my fault. You're the victim here. Don't justify yourself to your wife. You're ready to abandon us and Gregory, just so Erica can be happy," she said, picking up her phone, pretending to be engrossed in a conversation. But she took a picture of him and sent it to Erica. Lance came to see the son he's dreamed of his whole life. She wrote to Erica. Erica didn't know why she unlocked Julia's phone. Now, looking at her husband's picture, she regretted it deeply. She thought her husband was upset, but he rushed straight to Julia. Bravo! Before boasting, she should have thought with her own head that she was living in her sister's apartment. Erica ordered a taxi. She was going to kick the lovers out of the apartment now, take back the keys and erase these people from her life forever. Erica got into the taxi without even looking at the driver. "Hello." Erica didn't recognize me. She heard the question. She turned her head. Seeing the smile on the young man's face, she was embarrassed at first, but after a minute she realized she was sitting in the car with her classmate. "Anthony, what are you doing here? I heard you work in a construction company and hold a high position." "That's right." Anthony smiled. "Yesterday, I played cards and lost to my friend. Had to work in a taxi today instead of him." "And you? How are you?" "Erica, I heard you became a mother of many children." Erica silently nodded. "How's Lance? Why are you here without him?" Anthony continued. "We're getting divorced," she said. "Erica, I'm sorry. I didn't know. He sighed heavily and fell silent. Erica felt terribly awkward. Why did she blurt out about the divorce? It's okay. Everything's fine. You're not to blame that my husband cheated on me. My friend gave birth to his long-awaited son. We have 3 daughters together, she said. Wow. I didn't expect that from him, Anthony said. Neither did I. I'm actually on my way to see his mistress now. I want to look her in the eye and kick them both out of my sister's apartment, Erica said. Do you really need that? Why don't you come with me to a country house? You'll relax. You're divorcing your husband, and I divorced my wife a month ago. It's a good reason to celebrate, Anthony suggested. Well, I don't know. Honestly, I'm not in the mood for fun right now. I'm not feeling it, Erica replied. Anthony parked the car near Julia's house. Shall I wait for you? I have nowhere to rush, he asked cautiously. No need. I'll handle it myself, she said and got out of the car. Near the door, Erica shook her head and pressed the doorbell. Oh, Lance, your wife is here. It's an open house today, Julia sniped. She was dressed in a short robe, while Lance sat in a chair, rocking their son in his arms. Erica. He jumped up from the chair as if caught red-handed. Carefully laying their son in the crib, he turned around, opened his mouth to explain. But Julia interrupted him. Lance, don't get distracted. Keep rocking Gregory. You're doing quite well, Julia taunted. Erica smirked. What an idyllic scene. Why hadn't she noticed before how much bile Julia had? Erica, don't get the wrong idea. I just came to talk. I wanted to ask Julia to leave. Lance started to justify himself. Let's go have some tea, darling. Lance, as soon as you put Gregory to bed, join us. Julia continued to needle. Go and put him to bed yourself. I'm not your nanny, Lance retorted. They all went into the kitchen. I came for a moment. My sister will be here soon. She'll take the keys from you. You need to vacate the apartment within 2 hours. Unexpected circumstances arose. My sister urgently sold the apartment. New owners are moving in tomorrow. Erica, did you say everything? Now you can call your sister and tell her not to come. I won't leave anywhere with a little child. And you have no right to evict me. She squealed. And who are you? Do you have a lease agreement? On what grounds are you here? Erica hissed. Lance will be a witness. He'll confirm that you're retaliating against me, that you took rent from me and didn't pay taxes. Do you think you'll get away with it? Julia said, and Lance better not even try to open his mouth. Erica looked at her husband's pale face, then back at Julia. Don't you know you shouldn't betray people who constantly lent you a helping hand? Erica asked. If I were you, I'd keep quiet. Your help only brings trouble. Julia smirked. Unable to bait, Erica grabbed her by the hair and slammed her face into the refrigerator. Hearing a crunch, and then a piercing scream, she realized she had broken Julia's nose. Erica, what are you doing? She's a nursing mother. Don't touch her. We need to call an ambulance. Lance cried out in fear. If you continue like this, I'll really have to show you to a psychiatrist. How can I trust my children with you? Lance hurried to Julia, trying to pry her hands away from her nose, which she held tightly, groaning loudly. He handed her a towel so she could wipe the blood. Lance's mention of her daughters angered Erica. Realizing his implication, she grabbed a jar of jam from the table and hurled it at her husband's face. It hit him square on the nose. Erica thought she heard that familiar crunch again. While the two of them held their noses and whimpered, Erica stormed out of the kitchen. Leave the apartment keys with the neighbor. And I warn you, if you don't vacate the apartment today, things will get even worse. She yelled as she dashed out of the apartment. Outside, Erica spotted the familiar taxi. Mentally thanking Anthony, she jumped into the passenger seat. Let's go, she exclaimed, leaning back in the seat. She closed her eyes. She silently thanked Anthony for immediately driving off without asking unnecessary questions. When Erica opened her eyes, they were already far away, and only then could she finally exhale calmly. "Take me to my mom's," she whispered softly. "No, you're not going to your mom's. We're heading to the country house," Anthony replied. Erica opened her mouth to object. "No objections. Tomorrow night, I'll bring you home. Everyone will confirm you've been with us all day. We'll provide you with an alibi," Anthony stated. "Lance, you can do as you wish, but I won't let this go," Julia said in a nasal voice, examining her swollen face in the mirror. "You brought this upon yourself. If I were my wife, I'd have killed you," Lance retorted. He sat at the table, resting his head against the wall. "How am I involved in this? Your wife needs therapy. She should be responsible for her actions. By the way, I'm a nursing mother," Julia said, barely holding back tears. "If you try to go to the police, I'll say you got drunk and hit yourself on the fridge. I won't let anyone file charges against my beloved wife," Lance said. "You better tell us where to move our stuff. If she and her sister come back tonight, we won't be able to handle another fight," Julia said. "Pack up. Leave with the kid to your parents. Just so you know, don't count too much on my help." Julia looked offendedly at Lance. "In this state, do you want my mom to have a heart attack?" she said. "What are you suggesting then? I have nowhere to go myself. I can't take you and the kid to my mom's, can I? I suggest we gather our things and, until my face heals, temporarily move to your mom's. Besides, it's a chance for Grandma to get acquainted with her grandson. I definitely won't go home looking like this," declared Julia. "That's out of the question. I don't understand what you're trying to achieve here. If you want to finalize divorcing me and my wife, you won't succeed. You're not my type. I'd rather be alone than with you. Don't make me angry. As a father, you're obligated to take responsibility for your child. Dealing with him now, with this injury, is tough for me. And your mom could look after him temporarily. What's wrong with that? You're so annoying. Don't you understand that you and your kid are not what I need? Or is it not dawned on you yet that I love my wife?" Lance got up from the chair and gave her all the money he had left. "This should be enough for a ticket. Get ready. I'll try to persuade Erica's sister today to give you 3 days. But after 3 days, I don't want to see you here anymore. Enough trouble from people like you. And don't you dare go near my mother. I'll kick you out onto the street," Lance said. "Well, go to your crazy Erica then," Julia whispered, holding back tears. Felicity sat at her desk, rejoicing that tomorrow she would finally become a free woman. "Felicity, I want to talk to you," Ron's voice interrupted her reverie. "About what?" She knew perfectly well that he had come to persuade her not to divorce. "Why do we need to get divorced? There's nothing left for us to divide. I broke up with Carolyn. I filed papers renouncing paternity. There's nothing tying me to them anymore." Julia fed Gregory and put him back in his crib. It was fortunate that Lance had arranged with Erica's sister, and they were allowed to stay in this apartment for 3 days. Returning to her parents was out of the question. They were convinced that Gregory was Raja's son, and they were confident in their grandson's future. She wasn't prepared to return to her parents. There was still another option. "Hello," Julia began. She wanted to address Lance's mother by name, but forgot what it was. "Is Lance home?" Miranda immediately recognized who was standing before her. She'd had a serious talk with her son yesterday. Learning about his despicable treatment of his wife, she was ready to confront the scoundrel then and there. "Come in," she said, displeased. Miranda could barely contain herself. "Why did you come?" she asked, and loudly called for her son. She had no intention of letting the girl into the apartment. Seeing Julia, Lance could only sigh heavily. There was no energy left to argue. He had promised his mother that he would try everything to save the family. "Take the baby. Can't you see I'm struggling?" Julia whispered softly. "Thank Erica. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be standing here humiliating myself before you. I would have gone to my parents. She handed Lance their son. He took Gregory silently, looking guiltily at his mother. I'm warning you now, nobody is going to live here. You, my dear, when you wormed your way into your friend's husband's pants, what did you expect? Miranda said. And why are you silent? This wretch is tearing your family apart. Give her the baby and let her leave. I have 3 granddaughters, and I don't want anything to do with this. She gestured toward Gregory. I refuse to acknowledge him. Mom, Julia is leaving now, Lance said. Is that so? My dear relatives, whether you like it or not, I'm feeling unwell. She took a bottle of expressed milk from her bag and placed it on the key rack. Put this in the fridge. There's formula, diapers in the bag. I think you'll manage. Miranda stared at Julia with wide eyes. And I'm leaving. I'm telling you again, I'm feeling unwell. I need to rest. We need to find another apartment for me and my son. I don't know when I'll be back. I definitely won't be here today. Call me if anything, Julia said. Lance tried to grab her hand, but Julia pushed him away. She quickly opened the door and rushed out of the apartment. A cold sweat dripped down Miranda's back. She realized her son had fallen into a trap from which he was unlikely to escape. Lance was completely unprepared for this turn of events. Holding Gregory in his arms, he looked at the bewildered Miranda. Is this what you wanted? Now you can forget about your family. Erica isn't stupid. She won't take on a 4th child. And Julia won't calm down until she finally divorces you. Congratulations, son. What are we going to do now? I don't know. We need to talk to Erica. She's Julia's friend and knows her parents well. I suggest we take Gregory to them and let them deal with their daughter themselves. Will Erica even talk to you? I'm afraid if you approach her, you'll just start another scandal. I'll try talking to her myself, Miranda said, taking out her phone and dialing Erica's number. Erica opened her eyes, turned her head, and saw Anthony sleeping beside her, which sent a wave of panic through her. She peeked under the covers and breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness she had slept in her clothes, meaning she hadn't allowed anything unnecessary to happen. Struggling to recall through the dreadful headache, she remembered how she and Anthony had washed dishes together in the evening. Then he suggested having a little more to drink, and after that, her memory pieced together in fragments. Anthony, you promised me you'd sleep in the other room, she said. Don't worry. I slept downstairs all night, but I got cold towards morning, so I had to move over here, he replied. Their conversation was interrupted by a call. Seeing her mother-in-law's number, Erica put a finger to her lips. I'm listening, Miranda, she said, trying to keep her voice calm. Erica, please don't hang up. Try to listen to me to the end. Broken noses are just a drop in the bucket compared to what your ex-friend has done, Miranda said urgently. I'm listening carefully, Erica replied. Overcoming her headache, Erica got up from the bed and descended to the first floor, still holding the phone to her ear. If you need Julia's mother's phone number, I can send it to you, but I can't help you with anything else. Lance is to blame for ending up in this situation. I'm not going to help him, she stated firmly. Upon receiving the message from Erica, Miranda breathed a sigh of relief. Lance was calling Julia literally every 5 minutes, getting worked up because nobody was answering. Miranda went into the kitchen, closed the door tightly, and dialed Julia's mother's number. What do you mean she left Gregory with you? Julia's mother wondered. And where's Roger? Philida, we need to meet. I have to go to work, and there's no one to take care of Gregory. Your daughter warned me she's busy and doesn't know when she'll be back, Miranda explained briefly over the phone. She had no intention of delving into details over the phone. Let Julia explain everything herself. Come over and bring Gregory. We won't turn away from our grandson, Julia's mother said. Hearing these long-awaited words, Miranda quickly said goodbye, promising to bring their grandson in about 3 hours. Hello. "We've brought your grandson," Miranda said, stepping into the house and letting Lance with Gregory go ahead. Seeing the police officer at the table, they exchanged greetings. Miranda felt a wave of heat sweep over her body under his scrutinizing gaze. "Hello," Phillida grumbled discontentedly as she took her grandson from Lance's arms. "We managed to reach our daughter. Julia is crying and complaining that you've taken her child. Can you explain to the officer what's going on? Who asked you to bring our grandson here? Gregory has a mother. It's fortunate we managed to reach Julia. Our daughter is in tears, not knowing where to find her son." Julia's mother spoke calmly, but her face showed that she was absolutely convinced they had indeed stolen the child. "All right. Let's calmly sort this out. Why do you think we've taken Gregory? Your daughter left the child with us. She wasn't answering calls. Before leaving, she warned us not to expect her today. If you don't believe it, you can check the call history on your son's phone. Be thankful we didn't involve child services," Miranda explained calmly. After listening to Miranda, the police officer shook his head. It seemed like he agreed with her and didn't see anything criminal in her actions. He looked disapprovingly at Phillida, but didn't say anything aloud. "Julia will arrive soon. I don't know how you couldn't reach her. After your call, I immediately tried calling her daughter. She didn't pick up right away, but she called back 20 minutes later," Phillida said. Before entering the house, Julia paused, took a deep breath, and collected her thoughts. She couldn't even imagine that Lance and his mother would come up with the idea to bring Gregory to her parents. She entered the house. Seeing Gregory, she ran up to him. "Thank goodness, he's alive. I almost went crazy when I found out they took the child out of town." "How could you?" She addressed Lance, but he just smirked in response. "Maybe you'll stop lying and tell Mom how you abandoned your son, ran away somewhere unknown. By the way, we have a witness. And anyway, can you steal your own son?" Lance retorted. "I don't understand. And where's Roger?" "Julia, I don't understand anything. You said Roger is Gregory's father," Phillida asked. Her parents had never seen Roger, but according to their daughter, they knew that as soon as she gave birth, they would immediately get married. The parents had asked their daughter many times to introduce them to her future son-in-law, but Julia said he was a very busy man. "Mom, don't listen to him. This scoundrel ruined my whole life. He took advantage of me when Erica wasn't home. He forced me, and then he knelt down, apologized, and asked me not to tell his wife. I felt sorry for him. After all, he's my friend's husband, and they have 3 children. I took a pill. Giving birth to his child wasn't part of my plans, but obviously, something went wrong. I was sure I got pregnant by Roger, but when Gregory was born, I saw a birthmark on him and realized Roger had nothing to do with my son." Julia bit her lip, looking at her mother's widened eyes. "Julia, stop lying. No one forced you. You climbed into my pants yourself. You didn't even think about Roger at that moment." Lance interrupted. "I'm lying. I'm tired of you. Only troubles because of you. With your behavior, you only provoke your wife, and then she fights. See, Mom, it's your beloved Erica who's behind this," Julia retorted. "So, Lance is our grandson's father?" her mother asked. "Let the policeman go. Don't make fools of yourselves." Miranda spoke up. "I understand there was no kidnapping. Julia herself admitted that the young man is your grandson's father," said the policeman, getting up from his chair. "I hope you'll sort it out without me." He left the table and walked away. "Sister Erica's kicked us out of the apartment with Gregory. I wanted to stay with Miranda for a few days. Today, I left the child to look at the apartment options offered. And you got scared and went to my parents," Julia explained. "Do you realize you've ruined a family? Left 3 children without a father? I don't justify my son, but how could you sleep with your friend's husband? And after all you've done, you want me to let you and Gregory stay with me? That's out of the question." Miranda said. Why are you separating the children? It turns out you've acknowledged the granddaughters, but you don't even want to let our grandson through the door. Julia's father spoke up. He sat quietly on the sidelines, listening to the conversation. If Gregory was born out of wedlock, it doesn't mean he doesn't have a father and should be deprived of parental love and care. He added, I want my son to reconcile with Erica. Your daughter deliberately provokes Erica with her actions. If my future daughter-in-law finds out we support their relationship, she'll be upset. And I don't want to upset my daughter-in-law, Miranda said. Miranda got up from her chair and headed to the hallway. Lance hesitated for a moment before following her. Goodbye, Julia. I won't refuse financial assistance. I'll transfer 12% from my salary. I can't afford more. I have 4 children now. I understand he's my son and he's not to blame for anything. But I can't help more than that, Lance said. Philida nodded disapprovingly, and Julia's father clenched his fists but said nothing. You really got yourself into a mess. Thank goodness we got away with it easily, Miranda muttered as they drove away from the house. Maybe we should go see Erica together. Maybe she's cooled down by now and is ready to listen to you, Miranda suggested. Let's do it. Lance nodded thoughtfully. Looks like the lights are out at home. Maybe she went to her mom's. Lance raised his head, looking on his windows. His gaze fell on the car that had stopped near the entrance, from which Erica first emerged, followed by the driver. He opened the rear door, took out 2 pizza boxes and a bag of groceries. He beeped the alarm and followed Erica into the building. Soon they entered together. What was that? Did you see? Lance murmured, perplexed. I did. Let's wait a little longer. Let them go into the apartment. Let's pretend we didn't see them, Miranda suggested. No way. Lance jumped out of the car and headed up to the apartment. Behind the door, he heard a male voice, Erica's laughter. He was prepared for the worst, but upon seeing Anthony, all the questions he had prepared in those few minutes vanished. Hey, what are you doing here? Lance asked. Hi, Anthony genially replied. Good evening. Do you accept uninvited guests? An excited Miranda emerged from the elevator. Come in, Miranda. Erica smiled. Come into the kitchen. We'll have tea. Anthony is playing the role of the sponsor tonight. He's treating us to pizza. If Erica smiled at Miranda, her gaze towards her husband was as if she was waiting for the moment to hurl another jam jar at him. Where are the girls? Lance asked, glancing around the apartment. What does it matter? I don't ask where your son is, Erica retorted. I can answer that. My mom and I took him to Julia's parents. She's so audacious. She came to our house, dumped the kid, and drove off into the unknown. Unbelievable. Lance began to justify himself. What a hero. Fathering children, scattering them around. You only need one more for a full set of 5. Although, knowing your abilities, you might already have the 5th somewhere, Erica taunted. I don't have any more children. Lance looked at Anthony. Listen, Anthony, where did you come from? Lance tried to change the subject. What's it to you? Erica replied. I invited an old friend for tea. I have the right. I'm a single woman now. I invite whoever I want. Check your passport. You're my wife. If you've forgotten, I'll remind you, Lance said. Guys, enough fighting. How much longer can this go on? You're such a beautiful couple. The whole university used to admire you, Anthony suddenly said. I've watched you from the sidelines and concluded that you love each other. I can confidently say that all is not lost. Lance, you're to blame, of course, but Erica, look how he's suffering. Erica gave Anthony a displeased look. She didn't expect such words from him. Can such a thing be forgiven? And it won't be forgotten. Knowing Julia, she'll always remind me of it. I have 3 kids of my own. I don't have the strength for a 4th. Neither morally nor physically, Erica said. Anthony was right. She still loved her husband. But at the same time, She realized that nothing could change. Anthony, thank you for your concern. You correctly noticed that I still love my husband. It's a pity to leave the kids without a father. But Erica stopped herself to avoid crying. With a heavy sigh, Anthony got up from the table. He thanked for the hospitality. It's time for me to go home. He smiled. Erica, think about what I said. Betrayal cannot be forgiven. But I know that there are exceptions in life, he said as he left for the door. Seeing of her guest, Erica sat down at the table. How was the trip? She asked Miranda. Better not to ask. She waved her hand. You blame your husband, but you're also to blame. How could you be friends with such a person for so many years? You don't know how to choose friends, Miranda said. Don't worry. I won't have any friends now, Erica replied. Well, son, let's go home. Miranda got up from her chair. Thank you, Erica, for not throwing us out. Whatever happens between you, know that I'm here, and you'll always be my one and only beloved daughter-in-law. I haven't lost hope that you'll forgive my son someday, Miranda said. Mom, you go. I need to talk to Erica. I'll come later. What about? I think we've said everything to each other a long time ago. Aren't you afraid of losing your head this time? Erica said. I'm not afraid. What's life like this? Death would be better, Lance replied. Upon hearing his words, Erica barely held back tears again. Seeing off her mother-in-law, she sank into a chair. Erica. Lance paused for a moment. Let's take Gregory from Julia. She doesn't need the child at all. I think if I offer her, she'll gladly give him up. I dread to think what she'll raise Gregory into. Only such a wonderful mother like you can raise a good person out of Gregory. Please, think about my words. Are you out of your mind? Erica said. I thought better of you. Instead of shielding me from your problems, creating conditions for me to calm down, you're doing everything possible for me not only to stop loving you, but also to hate you. Now I'm finally convinced that I waited in vain for masculine deeds from you, which you're incapable of. She pointed to the front door. Go away. Until the divorce. Try not to cross my path again. We'll communicate only through lawyers. You can keep the car, but forget about the apartment. We won't split the children. Lance grabbed her hands, pressed her against the wall. It's easiest now to blame everything on me. You have to understand that you're also to blame. Knowing your brazen friend, you constantly laughing when she shamelessly dropped hints at me. Julia seemed to be joking, but sometimes the jokes went too far. It's very difficult to control yourself when someone shamelessly flirts with you, creating a playful atmosphere and hints, especially considering that we were both drunk. Listening to his confessions was disgusting. Erica tried to push him away, but Lance held her tightly. Let me go, you scoundrel. I hate you. Lance sighed heavily, released her hands, and stepped aside. I'm just trying to explain that I don't want to lose you, so that you finally understand that because of two fools who slept together while drunk, an innocent child is suffering. And if your reckless friend doesn't care about it, then I can't just stand idly by. There's also your guilt in Gregory coming into this world. You could have talked to me, but since you didn't, it means you were fine with everything. Everything suited you. If Julia hadn't gotten pregnant, I'm sure she would have climbed into your pants again, and you wouldn't have been able to refuse. There were many such cases, but I lost control only once. Are you really willing to destroy our family over one mistake? I give you my honest word that it won't happen again. And if you think it over and try to accept Gregory, I promise to do everything in my power to make sure you never regret it. After listening to her husband, Erica burst into hysterical laughter. You know, Lance, get out of here. And the sooner you do it, the better it will be for you, she said calmly. My answer: no, no, and no. I will never forgive you. And most importantly, I will never be able to love you and Julia's child. I don't want to be called an evil stepmother. Before cheating, you should have thought about that, she said. Well, You're a fool. You only think about yourself. Sometimes you need to think about the children too. Our daughters aren't to blame that their father slipped up once, and their mother, deciding to punish him, kicked him out of the house. Lance opened the door, lingered for a moment. If you change your mind, I'll be very glad. I won't change my mind. You can't force yourself to love even a small child. I'll soon stop loving you too. I'm strong. You'll see, by the time of our divorce hearing, there won't be a trace of love left for you. 3 months later, they were divorced. Lance complied with all of his wife's demands. Erica got the apartment and 37% of alimony, while Lance got the car. There was nothing more to divide. Erica had no intention of hindering his relationship with the children. A month after the divorce, Julia showed up at Miranda's apartment. Lance wasn't home. Julia was trembling, her son crying in her arms. She seemed on the verge of a breakdown, holding on to her last shreds of composure. 2 large bags were at her feet. "For God's sake, please take your grandson," she said. "My father had a stroke and is in the hospital. My mom's blood pressure is through the roof from nerves. It's become unbearable to live with my parents. I snap at my son over nothing. If you don't take Gregory, even just for a while, I'll have to put him in an orphanage." With a heavy sigh, Miranda stepped aside and let Julia into the apartment. She picked up Gregory, holding him close. The child immediately calmed down. "Julia, let's talk like adults. Last time you accused us of stealing your child. What's your story this time?" Miranda asked. "I came not to strangers, but to my child's father. I know Lance divorced Erica. He's alone now. Why don't we try living together for the sake of our son?" Julia walked into the living room and looked around. "Where's Lance?" "He works evenings as a taxi driver. He has a lot of kids. The girls are growing up fast, and Erica is financially struggling," Miranda replied. "I want to consult with Lance. If he doesn't agree to my proposal, then I'll give Gregory to an orphanage." "I can't handle him alone," Julia said. "Julia, you receive support. In addition to that, my son voluntarily sends you child support every month. What else are you dissatisfied with? If he wanted to live with you, he would have taken you away from your parents long ago. Calm down. Go back to your parents. They're sick. They need your help now. When will you understand that you had a child primarily for yourself? Don't give Gregory to an orphanage. Don't deprive him of his mother. You've already messed up a lot in your life. It's time for you to get smarter," Miranda replied. "It's easy for you to say." Julia sighed heavily. "Call Lance. Let him come. His son's fate depends on his decision. If he agrees, then I'll start the process of placing our son in an orphanage tomorrow. I've found out it can be done for a certain period. As soon as I get back on my feet, I'll take him back." The creak of the door lock made Miranda's heart skip a beat for a moment. Julia smiled brightly. Instead of a greeting, Lance started grumbling from the threshold. "Why did you come here? What's bothering you again? I send you money every month. If that's not enough for you, I'm sorry, but I can't give more." His mother had warned him about Julia's latest news. "Get the child ready. I'll drive you back to your parents myself," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. Let me warn you straight away. You have only 3 options. We try to raise our son together, or you raise him alone, or I temporarily give him to an orphanage." Seeing Lance's stunned expression, she smirked bitterly. "And don't look at me like that. How are you any better if you don't want the son either? If you don't want to live with me, then raise Gregory on your own. I don't mind. Besides, you have excellent experience in raising children. I've heard you. Tonight, you and the son will stay here," Lance said. "And tomorrow, you can start gathering the necessary documents and arrange for the son to go to the orphanage. Then I'll take him, adopt him, but I never want to see you again. Either willingly give up the child, or I'll involve social services. I'll say you're abandoning the child, not for the first time. Are you in agreement? Yes, Julia snapped. Lance didn't know yet how he would live on from here, but he was sure he wouldn't let Julia near their child. He would start by revoking her parental rights and then immediately take the son from the orphanage. Seeing approval in Miranda's eyes, Lance understood his mother was on his side. The fragile peace that had recently formed between him and Erica would undoubtedly shatter again. But even that wouldn't make him ever give up his son. Nancy felt bitter flies flittering in her stomach with anticipation. She still couldn't believe this was happening, not in a dream, but in reality. Come on. I hope you won't be upset. I've made some changes to the bedroom decor to my liking, Lance invited. Roger swung open the front door before her. Stepping into their apartment, Nancy stopped in awe, unable to utter a single word. The entire apartment was adorned with light laminate flooring mimicking natural wood, bright wallpaper, and spotlights that made the space even more luminous. Nancy felt like she had stepped into a fairy tale. She still couldn't believe that soon they would move in, and they would have their own personal space again, just like in the good old days, where they could be just their family. Now, can I count on your trust? Roger asked, planting a kiss on her temple and giving her a mischievous look. I'll have to think about it, she playfully replied. She stepped out onto the balcony, which was also paneled with light materials. It was stunning. Nancy loved everything about it. She was in indescribable awe. She glanced briefly at her husband's ringing phone. As soon as she saw Julia on the caller ID, her excellent mood instantly evaporated. I didn't understand. Are you two still calling each other? The call was so unexpected that she didn't know how to react. No, of course not. I don't know what she wants from me. I'm not planning to answer, Roger replied. Put it on speakerphone. Talk to her in front of me. And for heaven's sake, make sure I don't hear anything unusual in your conversation. Otherwise, you'll have to move into the new apartment without me, Nancy said. She couldn't believe her husband might be deceiving her again. She had been trying to keep an eye on his every move all this time, and there hadn't been any alarm bells. She began to calm down slowly, but it seemed Julia sensed it and decided to remind her of herself. Nancy, maybe you shouldn't talk to her, or let me talk to her. I assure you there's nothing between us and never will be. If you don't believe me, let's check the call logs, Roger said. I said put it on speakerphone. She insisted. What do you want? Roger answered Julia's call. Hi, sweetheart. I miss you. Aren't you happy to hear from me? Maybe we could meet. I really want to see you again and talk, Julia said. Are you out of your mind? Say what you need. I'm not going to be distracted by the nonsense you always spew. You have exactly 1 minute, and if you don't make it, I'll hang up and block your number, Roger said firmly. With a clear mind, Nancy realized the call was indeed unexpected for her husband. But for some reason, she wanted to make sure of it. I'm calling about business. Help me get a job. You're a businessman. Finding me a nice position shouldn't be a problem for you. And I won't forget your help. Julia chuckled. There's no suitable job for you, and there never will be. Do you have any other questions? I don't understand. And what kind of job do you want? Aren't you on maternity leave? Instead of ending the conversation, he unexpectedly asked. My child's father took him away from me. Sobbing was heard on the other end of the line. Nancy and Roger exchanged glances. I understand. This is your last warning. Don't call me. Don't cross my path. If you do, I'll crush you like an annoying bug. I wouldn't be surprised if you got rid of your child yourself. Farewell and try to listen to my words. Roger ended the call. He blocked her number immediately and gave Nancy a meaningful look as she watched his actions. Am I forgiven? Have I passed the truth test? He asked unsurely. Nancy, I swear I'm not talking to her. You'd have to be an idiot to get involved with that crazy woman again. I'm even scared to think about it. Relax. I believe you. But I warn you, you don't need to warn me. I know everything. If you suspect something, you'll kick me out of your apartment, Roger continued, smiling and mimicking her words. Erica, hello. Tell the girls that I won't be able to visit them this weekend, Lance said. Okay, I'll let them know, Erica replied shortly. Julia gave up Gregory. She surrendered him to the orphanage. I adopted him. Yesterday, me and Mom finally brought him home. Upon hearing his words, Erica was speechless for a moment. Who will take care of him? She asked, surprised after a long silence. Mom, there's no one else. The boss made concessions and let her work remotely. Tell the girls that I won't be able to visit every weekend. Grandma needs a break too. I don't have a wife and probably never will. You did the right thing by adopting him. Just don't forget about the girls. Come visit them once in a while. They always wait for you. And despite you letting us down, they still love you, Erica said. 5 years passed. Erica's life had changed dramatically during this time. The girls had grown up. As soon as the youngest daughter started kindergarten, Anthony helped her land a decent job. Life immediately took on new colors. With a decent salary, there were more opportunities to indulge herself and the children. Only 3 years after the divorce from Lance, Erica was able to let go of the situation. She turned into a confident woman. She was able to love again and build new relationships. She and Tomas worked together. In a car accident, his wife and child died. Tomas survived but spent a long time in the hospital and then recovering, taking care of Erica. He calmly reacted to the news that she was the mother of 3 children. Just a week ago, she and Erica celebrated a wonderful milestone. Exactly 1 year of living together. Tomas had developed fairly good relationships with Erica's daughters. They didn't forget their biological father, of course, but with Lance having a 4th child, their meetings became less frequent. Currently, the children only see their biological father on holidays. The girls had got used to Lance's free time being taken up by Gregory. At first, they were upset, but then they gradually got used to it. But now Erica knows for sure that it's not worth forgiving people who didn't appreciate you and probably never loved you. The main thing is not to despair, not to give up, not to stand still, but to try to move forward. And then life itself will reward you and will definitely send you someone who will appreciate you and won't make you cry. And if tears appear, they will only be from laughter or happiness. The first year after Julia abandoned Gregory, she hoped that she would soon get back to her old life. Several times she lurked near Roger's workplace, begged for forgiveness, chased after him, but Roger didn't even look her way. When he saw her, he grimaced and warned the security not to let her onto the premises. Then she took to frequenting nightclubs, hoping to hook up with a young man at least moderately wealthy. But even here, she had no luck. After the first night, maximum the second, guys disappeared somewhere, and she had to look for new ones. But the new ones didn't pay her proper attention either. Money was constantly tight. She had to get a job as a saleswoman in a small 24-hour shop. Together with her co-worker, they rented a small apartment, and in their free evenings, over cheap wine, all she could do was reminisce about Roger and dream about an oligarch who probably didn't even know she existed. Analyzing her life, Julia came to the conclusion that the only person who truly loved her was Brendan. She tried to find out more about him and learned that her ex-husband had married a young elementary school teacher. She bore him a daughter. Judging by the photos on social media, Brendan was happy, loved his wife, and didn't remember her anymore. If she could turn back time, she probably wouldn't have gotten involved with Roger, wouldn't have divorced her husband, and would be living happily now. Ron sat in his small office, drinking tea and pondering his life. The story with Carolyn disrupted his usual life routine. That awful woman did everything possible to make him lose faith in himself and even fear women. He did everything for Felicity, thinking that she would come to her senses, but he turned out to be unnecessary to her. His ex-wife is living just fine without him, going to the gym, visiting the pool. Once he tried to talk to her again, but Felicity replied that she didn't have time to wash his socks and underwear. That was the end of the conversation. Now all he could do was watch his ex from the sidelines and remember how good he used to have it. The one who got off lightly in this story was Roger. Over the 5 years, he managed to convince Nancy to stop suspecting him and to learn to trust him. And most importantly, she realized that she didn't make a mistake and got 2 prizes at once: an apartment and a husband who managed to find the key to her cold heart again. Credit must be given to Roger, who also learned his lesson from this. He spoils his beloved daughters, never denying them anything. And as for starting another affair on the side, he doesn't even consider it. He has before his eyes a vivid example of his father, who ended up alone in his old age. Roger doesn't want such a fate for himself. Why spend his life on other women when he has his beloved wife by his side, without whom he can't imagine his life anymore? No, he won't.